Chapter 293. Feeling something slapping his face, Victor slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was not Ephraim, but one of Ephraim's subordinates. Victor only had a vague impression of this subordinate of Ephraim. There was no conversation between them, but he didn't have time to be surprised. More surprising things were yet to come. That was Ephraim's current appearance. Ephraim was actually tied up at this moment. He looked very angry, obviously extremely dissatisfied with the situation. But he couldn't do anything, because this subordinate was holding a deadly pistol in his hand. It was clear that something had happened while Victor had been unconscious for a short period of time. Even Victor found that he had been separated from Ephraim. He had to be vigilant, looking at this subordinate with a weapon in his hand. He didn't seem to want to hurt him. Victor couldn't help but feel so confused. At this time he stood up. This subordinate just looked at him and smiled slightly. "You." Victor couldn't figure out the situation in front of him. This subordinate made a gesture at this time. Victor nodded hesitantly. The two walked to a corner, paying attention to the tied-up Ephraim while talking. The man said, "I think there's still a minute before your colleagues will be here, Mr. Victor. The next thing will be handed over to you." At the same time, this subordinate put away the pistol in his hand and stretched out his hands towards Victor. This was a gesture of wanting to be handcuffed by him. Victor frowned. "I don't understand what you mean." "It's very simple." The subordinate quickly said, "Inspector Victor, arrest me too. After that, I'll apply to be a witness to testify something about Ephraim, so that I can get a reduced sentence." "You're from the Typica family?" Victor couldn't help but say in shock. He couldn't help but think so. Thinking about it, he had to deal with Ephraim because of Yuri's threat. In that case, this subordinate's words were quite obvious. "I have nothing to do with the Typica family." Unexpectedly, this subordinate shook his head, giving an answer that made Victor more surprised. "As for who I am, I think, Mr. Victor, you'll know soon." Ding! It was the sound of the elevator doors opening. The man hurriedly urged, "Come on, lock me up too." "Wait, you need to make it clear first." Victor frowned, but time did not wait for him. The man shook his head and quickly picked up Victor's handcuffs, cuffed his hands, and slowly squatted on the ground. The door opened and 3 uniformed police officers rushed in. They happened to see the man squatting on the ground. They walked in front of Victor and hurriedly asked. Victor and the man looked at each other. The man suddenly said, "Inspector, Ephraim hid a lot of criminal evidence in the security room behind a bookcase upstairs. I'm willing to be a witness, really. I only ask for a lighter sentence." "Oh dear. Inspector Victor, what should we do now?" A police officer quickly looked at Victor after hearing that. It was hard to stop halfway. Victor took a deep breath, saying slowly, "You go upstairs and see if there's a security room. In addition, let the people downstairs watch the entrance and exit of the building. Don't let anyone leave here first." "Yes." The police officer saluted and hurriedly left. This building was very conspicuous in the vicinity and was famous enough. At this time, it was not really a time when the streets were empty, but there were several police cars surrounding it. Moreover, the onlookers clearly saw that several policemen arrested the famous Mr. Ephraim. Even if there were no reporters present, the flashes of the onlookers' mobile phones were obviously not worse than if there were reporters present. Victor walked out. He lit a cigarette and smoked slowly. Watching the scene of Ephraim being sent into the police car, he was not happy anyway. At this time, his eyes suddenly saw a black limousine parked on the roadside. When the window of the back seat of the limousine was lowered, Victor saw a familiar face. It was Brubov, the one who told him at the beginning that the first auction of the Nameless Maiden was held in the hotel. Victor's surprise didn't last long. He soon calmed down, walking down the stairs and ordering the police officers to take action. Finally, he crossed the crowd, quietly circled to the side of the limousine, and sat in the back seat of the limousine from the other side. "I'm glad to see you come out safely, Victor." Brubov smiled at this time. I was right. You really gave me a big surprise. Brubov, tell me honestly, what did you do? Victor asked with a serious face. Brubov closed his eyes, saying slowly, Victor, do you remember what my dream was when I was young? Victor was stunned. He didn't understand why he would bring this up, but he still nodded, subconsciously. You said that you want to change this country, so you've been fighting for it. Finally, you have entered the upper class. Brubov, with your current ability, you can do something for this country. But it's not enough. Brubov shook his head. Even if I'm a very rich businessman, even if I know many officials, I'm still a businessman. I need more opportunities to speak. Remembering Efim's identity as a member of parliament, Victor suddenly understood something. You want to take Efim's position? Efim can't escape this time. Brubov sneered. Once he is convicted, someone will recommend me to take his place and take a seat in the parliament. Victor couldn't help being silent. After a long time, he stared at Brubov, his friend for many years, and said slowly, Efim's henchman was bribed. In this case, you could have pulled him down long ago. Why did you wait until today? Why did you wait until today to catch him? Victor, don't you understand? Haven't you thought about why you were caught by the Typica family? What I mean is, this lawless family caught you, but didn't kill you. Instead, they let you help deal with Efim? Brubov said softly, Victor, my strength alone is always limited. I need a partner, a real partner. I need you. Now your boss in the police station is dying. After this, Victor, you should prepare well. Your official career will go further, and it will be a big step. What's the relationship between you and the Typica family? Victor suddenly took a cold breath and blurted out. Brubov glanced at him and just smiled. The Typica family is my partner for now. I didn't expect that there's a big crocodile behind this who wants to deal with Efim. Behind the black limousine, Anna muttered. She suddenly looked up at Luaccio. When did Yuri start to contact Brubov? Contact? Luaccio shook his head. They didn't contact each other before. The one who really contacted was the real heir of the Typica family. Do you know what kind of business the Typica family does? They hope to get more transportation channels. So they came to Moscow just to find a partner. Of course, as you see, Miss Anna, it is this Mr. Brubov whom the Typica family is looking for. Luaccio said indifferently. Then, coincidentally, Mr. Yuri also planned to revenge. He wanted to get the power of revenge, so I think Mr. Brubov is the real power we provided to him. When Anna couldn't help but smile bitterly. Luaccio said softly, I think it should be since you took this painting out of the gallery. Brubov intended to let Victor be the new chief of police, so he specially told him the place of the first auction. He hoped that by guiding Victor to intervene in this matter, he could get enough benefits. Mr. Yuri wanted to revenge Efim, so the more miserable Efim's fate was, the happier he would be. Brubov bought over Efim's men, and in fact he already had a lot of evidence of Efim's crimes. Therefore, Mr. Yuri was naturally willing to come forward and do Brubov a favor, so that Victor would eventually become the person who arrested Efim. Anna gritted her teeth. She looked at the person who brought her back from death temporarily without any gratitude. She just said with hatred, Brubov will deal with Efim. Efim won't have a good end, and you, knowing this, still took away all of Yuri's. Devil. You're more evil than the devil. Luaccio said indifferently, we didn't force anyone. Mr. Yuri chose the road of no return because he was shot by Miss Anna on the platform of the subway station, right? Anna's lips moved slightly, but she couldn't say anything. She could only raise her eyes, looking at the moon after the full moon. Although the 3 shots did hit Mr. Yuri's body and made him bleed a lot, Luaccio said slowly, but I think it's not enough to kill Mr. Yuri. Miss Anna, did you calculate the shooting position? Because it's so accurate that I have to doubt it. Of course. He shook his head. I don't think Mr. Yuri can doubt it. Chapter 294. I didn't want to kill him at all. Anna covered her face with her hands. Her voice came out from her fingers and became unclear. But I had to do this. He shouldn't threaten FM. Since he escaped, why did he come back? She needed to say these things. They were buried in her heart, making her unable to breathe at this moment. Fortunately, the person he wanted to see was me. Anna put down her hand and took a deep breath. She said in a low voice with tears in her eyes, "Yes, I did shoot him, but I never thought of killing him. He may be seriously injured, but at least he can lie safely in the hospital bed. FM will never let go of anyone who threatens him. Yuri told him that he shouldn't come back." Luaccio looked at Anna, saying expressionlessly, "But Miss Anna, you did shoot him, didn't you? No matter what the reason is, the moment you shot him, Mr. Yuri was destined to suffer the greatest pain. Or are you going to confess to him later to ask for his forgiveness?" Anna shook her head. She took another deep breath. "I won't do that. He just needs to lie in the hospital for a while. I won't show up in front of him again. Even if he doesn't forgive me in this life, I have no opinion. Even if he lied to me in the end and didn't tell me that he sold the painting to FM and asked me to come back for FM. Even if I lost my life, I won't blame him." She sneered at herself. "But I didn't expect, and he probably didn't expect, that we would meet you." Luo said indifferently, "As guests, whether it's Miss Anna or Mr. Yuri, their desire is too strong." As the boss of the club, Luaccio didn't intend to explain to the guests. Their strong desire was like luring a hungry wolf. When the transaction was triggered, the boss with the supreme power of the club also needed to assume the obligation in front of the guests. "Really?" Anna smiled bitterly. She was very clear about the anger and resentment in her heart when FM pinched her neck, as well as how unwilling she was to accept it. "It took me 3 years to finally get close to FM and gain his trust after exhausting all means." Anna said in a low voice, "How can I die before I send this demon to hell with my own hands and make him eat all his sins? I can't let myself die. Even if I die, I will drag him into hell with me. I want to live until I can see him suffer pain and anxiety. I want to see him lose everything. I want to see him suffer a fate worse than death." Anna gritted her teeth. Her eyes were filled with resentment. "I don't care what you do." "So, from the moment you met Mr. Yuri, you had already decided to make use of him?" Luaccio asked curiously. Anna took a deep breath and smiled bitterly. Every day, I can only force a smile beside FM. He never really trusted me. I had to do something. I had to tempt him into making a mistake. When I met Yuri in the art gallery, I knew my chance had come. I know that FM is a person who never knows his place. I told him my plan, and he even agreed at once." Anna lowered her head and said softly, "I've known him since that day. God really gave him unparalleled talent, but he didn't get the opportunity to match this talent. He had his own dream. He hoped to be a real painter. He hoped his works could be recognized by the whole world. He hoped to make his own sky. But I finally made use of his dream." Anna said faintly, "I told him that there was a chance to make his wish come true. In the beginning, he didn't know about this. Instead, he wholeheartedly imitated the nameless maiden. It was only because I told him that this was the only way to show off his strength to a potential investor. But in the end, he still noticed." Anna shook her head. "It's not a chance to be famous. He's just a tool for FM to make money. He can't really let his paintings be known to the whole world. He didn't even have the chance to paint what he wanted to paint. All of them were merely other people's belongings. But he finally finished the first painting, The Nameless Maiden. I'm afraid it's because of you, Miss Anna." Anna's shoulders slightly shrugged, saying sadly, I know it all. I can clearly feel his feelings for me, but I won't and can't respond to him, because I was constantly reminding myself not to forget my purpose. I must let FM suffer the punishment he deserves. Only in this way can those who suffered misfortune because of FM, this devil, rest in peace. Las Patiscea mining area? Luaccio suddenly said. You know? Anna suddenly raised her head. Boss Luo said indifferently, "Nothing, I just met a gentleman who also came out of this mining area." Really? Anna didn't ask who the man was. She just heaved a heavy sigh. Los Pataskea mining area, that's where I grew up. But it has always been controlled by others. The capital constantly squeezed us, and it became worse in the hands of FM. When I was young, there was a hero in our mining area. I thought our life would be better, but unfortunately, Anna said bitterly, the hero is gone, my home, my relatives are gone. But she also said bitterly, but I will never let go of FM who ruled the mining area like a devil. I want to end it all. She also said sadly, no matter what I have to sacrifice, no matter how much Yuri hates me, no matter how much he hates me. Her eyes were shining with crystal luster that didn't exist in the night. Seeing this, Luacho gently turned around, carrying Anna on his back, saying slowly, "It's good that Miss Anna has been aware of this from the beginning, but it's also good that you can say it out." The hatred of more than 10 years was hidden in the bottom of her heart. She couldn't tell anyone, nor could she. It was too heavy. Anna broke down and cried bitterly. He didn't see her most vulnerable side from this back, but he could hear the whisper of the soul behind her, gradually becoming lighter. Luacho didn't turn back until the crying faded and calmness was restored. He stretched out his hand, and the servant girl brought him a square handkerchief. Luacho walked to Anna, giving her the square handkerchief and whispering, "Do you feel better?" Anna gave a start. She subconsciously looked at the square handkerchief. She didn't know why she had a feeling of wanting to cry again, but she also seemed to feel an unprecedented relief. She took a deep breath, looking at the police car that was about to leave. Since Brubov was involved in this matter, FM could only get a bad result. Can we still make a deal now?" "Of course, at any time." Luacho nodded with a smile. "I think, bang!" All of a sudden, a huge noise sounded, which was so shocking. When they turned around, they saw an SUV had hit the police car that was escorting FM. At this time, a man wearing a black mask rushed out of the SUV. He held an automatic rifle and began to shoot. This made the few police officers hide behind their respective police cars in fear. At the same time, FM climbed out of the hit police car in a panic. His hands were locked in handcuffs, and he seemed to curse loudly at this time. The man shot at FM's feet with the automatic rifle, and then pointed at the SUV. Chapter 295. In the car, one of the men with a black hood cut the handcuffs on FM's hands roughly with a pair of iron pliers. But FM scolded, "Is this how you guarantee the safety of your customers? Don't you know that I would have been killed if you had hit me a little bit? Are you dead?" The other man who was driving said indifferently. FM snorted, "Is this the service attitude of your Michael Club? Every year, I have to pay hundreds of millions in membership fees just to get this kind of service? Tell me your names. I'll definitely complain to Mr. Sun." First of all, the man who was driving didn't turn his head, saying indifferently, "You didn't tell us in advance that you were in danger. Secondly, when we arrived, you were already in the police car. We had no interest in rushing into the police station to save you. Finally, my name is Tianzue. The one next to me is Tianbai. You're welcome to complain." FM snorted coldly. He just wanted to vent his dissatisfaction, because he was extremely angry that he became a prisoner overnight and was even betrayed by his confidant. Before he was taken away by the police had already pried open his safe room. The things hidden inside were enough for him to have dozens of reasons not to stay in this country anymore. "Where are we going now?" After calming down, FM quickly asked. "Send you to the river. I'm afraid it's difficult for you to board the plane now. Let's go by water." Tianzue said indifferently, "Don't worry, you're a member of the club. You won't lose the membership fee you paid. We'll send you away safely." "Well, according to the information you filled in from the premise, the first place you want to be sent to when you're in danger is Italy." FM clenched his fists. Things happened too fast tonight. If he left here, he would lose nearly half of his wealth. Wait, I can't leave like this. Efim gritted his teeth. At least there's one guy. I don't want him to have a good time before I leave. Mr. Efim, we don't recommend you to complicate matters, Tianbai said indifferently at this time. Especially when you need to escape, the idea of revenge out of anger is something that only fools and boors will do. But Efim sneered. What Michael Club? When I first joined the guild, all of you made it sound so nice. Now, can't you do anything? Give me the phone. I want to talk to your boss. Tianzue looked at Tianbai and shrugged. Tianbai gave Efim a mobile phone. Heaven's defeat? What is it? I am Efim. Oh, so it's Mr. Efim. The voice on the other end of the phone said with a light smile. It seems that Tianzue and Tianbai have successfully brought you out. Mr. Efim, don't worry, we will send you safely to... Oh, yes, Italy. No. Before that, I have one more request. Efim snorted. He looked at Tianzue and Tianbai in the carriage and said coldly, However, your men don't seem to have a good service attitude. It's like this, Mr. Efim. Tianzue and Tianbai were only responsible for transportation. If it's any other request that's beyond their delivery duties, I have to apologize here, but they won't agree to it. I don't care. Before leaving, I want you to help me get rid of a guy. I don't like to play games with my enemies slowly after going to Italy. I like to make a quick decision. Efim said in a low voice, I don't care what these two guys are responsible for, but I believe that there's nothing in the world that money can't buy. Help me get rid of my enemy. I'll give you any money. The phone was silent for a while, then the voice of Mr. Sun sounded. Mr. Efim, please give the phone to Tianbai. The phone was soon handed to Tianbai. Tianbai listened calmly at this time. Listen, the boss asked us to restrain ourselves as much as possible during this time. However, since Efim is so angry and willing to be slaughtered by us, we have no reason to refuse the request of our respected member. Remember, be quick. After all, Moscow is still the territory of Dongzheng. Don't cause unnecessary trouble. Tianbai nodded and said indifferently, I see. He turned off the phone and looked at Efim, saying slowly, So, Mr. Efim, please tell me the address of your enemy. I think it's best to let you get on the boat before dawn. Efim snorted, squinting his eyes and saying in a address slowly, Whoosh! Rumble. That was the sound of the subsiding engine. The Dodge Tomahawk that finally stopped also turned off the headlights. Vera took off her helmet and shook her hair before walking down. After hearing the sound, Vicar hurried out of the house. He opened his hands and showed a happy look. Dear F&C, congratulations on completing a successful assignment. Where's the painting? Vera smiled indifferently. I hope I didn't break it when I opened the frame. Oh, definitely not. Vicar smiled and said, I've seen it. There's no damage at all. In other words, I've never seen such a complete one. Vera didn't want to talk nonsense with Vicar here. She threw the key to Vicar and walked into the house. The painting tube was casually placed on the sofa in the living room. Vera turned over the back of the sofa and sat on it. Then she opened the painting tube and took out the nameless maiden that was hidden inside. She smiled slowly. After a hard day's work, it was a good way to comfort herself to appreciate her spoils of war. Vicar, who had pushed the Dodge Tomahawk into the garage, came in at this time whistling, How does it feel to hold a national treasure in your hand? Unexpectedly, Vera suddenly frowned and said coldly, Terrible! Terrible? Vicar gave a start. Vera tore the painting in her hand into two halves, saying indifferently, This painting is fake. Vicar hurriedly picked up the torn paper and said in disbelief, Is this a fake? But this is obviously from Efim. But when I went to take it back, there was nothing strange. Vera sighed and said, Look at the lower right edge of the drawing paper. Vicar subconsciously turned over the painting paper. Looking at the place, Vera said. Suddenly, Vicar opened his mouth, and his expression was very interesting. because there was a line of very clear words clearly printed in this place. Made in China, this. What's going on? Vicar grabbed his hair and said in confusion, Wait, let me think. This painting was bought by FM, and then you took it from him. Then this is a fake. That is to say, in the Manor auction, this is a fake. No. When the Manor auction, so many collectors, how could they not see that this is a fake? Vera also leaned on the sofa, frowning. At that time, FM was discussing with a policeman to frame the owner of the manor with this painting. Well, he wouldn't use such an obvious fake. But if what he took out is a real painting, but what you brought back is a fake? Vicar felt that his IQ was not enough, saying blankly, So, where is the real, the nameless maiden? Maybe one person will know. Vera suddenly said. Vera looked at Vicar, and Vicar also looked at Vera. Both of them almost said in unison, The owner of the manor! Ding dong. At this time, Vicar's notebook in the living room suddenly rang. Vicar subconsciously opened it to have a look. At first glance, he whispered, FM was taken away from the police car. According to Edgar, this was a very rare kind of wine. But Yuri didn't taste the difference between this and the inferior vodka he was used to drinking. So what if he became the heir of the Typica family? So what if he had mountains of money and beauties? Under such an identity, he was still Yuri, not the real heir of the Typica family who had received countless education and knew how to enjoy this kind of rare wine and taste its unique flavor. Just now Edgar said that the police had officially arrested FM, based on a long-existing cooperation between the Typica family and Brubov. FM had no way to turn over this time. It seemed that for a big shot like FM, it was far more painful for him to lose everything and spend his life in prison than to let him leave the world directly. It should be a good time to celebrate, right? Yuri thought so, but he didn't know why. He just felt that such a rare and delicious wine seemed to have no taste. It tastes awful. He shook his head and laughed at himself. He even didn't know what to laugh at himself. Was this a ridiculous life? Was this real and illusory wealth? Or this short life? Revenge. The revenge was almost successful, but it seemed that he didn't have that kind of carefree feeling. Yes, he didn't have the feeling of ecstasy and laughter that he thought he could have. Yuri subconsciously grabbed the brush next to him and then mixed the paints casually. He stood in front of the drawing board for a long time, but he didn't draw the first stroke. He suddenly found that he didn't know what he should draw. Finally, Yuri waved his hand abruptly, drawing a straight line on the paper with the paintbrush, as if he was going to split the paper into halves. He heavily threw the brush on the ground. Ah! He began to break the drawing board in front of him. He knelt on the ground, grabbing his hair with both hands and putting his head on the floor. Ah! He was crying. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. It was Edgar's voice. Sir, are you all right? After a moment of silence, Yuri asked through the door. Sir, I have to tell you, just now there was news that FM seemed to have been rescued by someone. Edgar's voice was a little fast, although I think the best choice for FM at this time is to escape as soon as possible. But it's not impossible that he will be angry and come to revenge. Well, we still don't know the origin of the person who rescued him and how powerful he is. Chapter 296. Since Mr. Victor left, Yelgo found that his treatment seemed to be much better. Although he was still chained to the wall, the length of the chain was long enough for him to reach the table in the basement. Oh, yes, he could also get the food on the table, except that he was still chained. Well, at least he had food and drink, which was good enough. Yelgo had to comfort himself in this way. He kept asking the guards where Mr. Victor had gone and whether he had been harmed, but he couldn't get the answer. Yelgo always thought that he was a very optimistic person. However, no matter how optimistic and self-comforting he was, he felt more and more uneasy. Especially at that moment, there was a sound outside. After the person guarding him hurriedly ran out, this kind of uneasiness almost solidified. This was because after the first sound was heard, More and more sounds were heard. It was as if someone was fighting outside. Is anyone there? Let me out. What the hell happened outside? Yelgo couldn't help but shout loudly. Bang, 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 bang. Is anyone there? Yelgo forcefully pulled the chain that locked him, but it was nailed to the wall. It was very sturdy. Yelgo showed a hesitant look. Finally, he seemed to make up his mind. He took a deep breath at this time, grabbing a section of the chain with both hands and began to pull it hard. He forcefully gritted his teeth. His arms suddenly swelled up. His teeth suddenly became sharper, and his pupils changed a little. His ears seemed to be pulled by something, becoming longer and sharper. His fingernails also became sharp like claws. Ah! Yelgo growled in a low voice, and the chain was broken. The abnormality on his body disappeared at this moment. Yelgo quickly took a few deep breaths, adjusting his heart rate, and then walked to the door of the basement. He opened it, poked his head out to take a look, and then slipped out. In fact, he was rejoicing that he had finally waited until there was no one around. Why can Efim be rescued? It was a questioning tone. Luaccio looked at Anna, who was scolding him. Instead of answering, he asked, Why can't Efim be rescued? Anna looked at the chaotic scene. After the SUV left, the police still didn't dare to come out from their hiding spots. She gritted her teeth and said, Aren't you here to deal with Efim? Are you just going to watch him get rescued? Miss Anna, Luaccio said seriously, I think you have misunderstood something. We didn't say we were going to deal with Efim. There was no such thing in the past. In the future, if there isn't a reason, there won't be one in the future. But Yuri wants revenge. We have already given him the power to take revenge. Luaccio shook his head and said, As for whether he can succeed, that is not in our agreement. Anna glanced at him hatefully but looked away. She knew that every word this person said was the truth. Whatever she wanted, it was her personal wish, and the other party would fulfill that wish. She gave it, but she couldn't get the desired result. She had tried hard, but she couldn't achieve the desired result, as if it was a trick of fate. Anna gritted her teeth and suddenly said, Yuri has lost everything. I can't let him sacrifice everything to get such a result. Tell me, can Efim get away or not? Luaccio was silent for a moment, and suddenly asked, Miss Anna, you mean you want to peep into the future, right? What do you mean? Anna frowned. Luaccio said, Miss Anna wants to know whether Efim can escape or not. Then I think what you really mean is whether Efim can safely get through this crisis and get away with it, right? Please forgive me for being long-winded, because I need to confirm the customer's needs. Anna nodded directly. Anna didn't have time to discuss the future with Luaccio. She said anxiously, I don't care about the future. I just want to know the result. Sorry. Luaccio shook his head slowly. It's not that we don't like you, but I'm afraid Miss Anna can't afford this part of the price, even if you use up all the trading volume of your soul. Moreover, I have to tell you that even if you peep into the future may be changed because of the actions of the peeper. So about the goods that can peep into the future, I'm afraid it's the least cost-effective thing. I'm not one of them. Not to mention Anna. Even Luaccio himself had a sudden idea of future information. But that was a price that he, as a boss, couldn't afford at present. Not to mention an ordinary person. Stop it. After all, this is just an excuse for you not to do it. You can say whatever you want, but it's just a lie. Anna didn't know the true horror behind these words, nor did she know what was behind the topic of peeking into the future. She was just a very ordinary girl, an ordinary girl who gave up a lot of things for revenge. She only took it as an excuse for him not to help. From the very beginning, she defined this weird club boss as a guy like a devil who only wanted to get everything of human beings. Devils reap without sowing and get the biggest benefit with the least cost, which was the most normal thing. If Miss Anna thinks so from the bottom of your heart, we won't argue. We can understand the customer's anxious mood. Luaccio shook his head and didn't want to talk more about this issue, but said softly, "But I can tell you where FM wants to go now." "Well, don't worry, this part is free. You can take it as a gift." "Where to?" Anna asked hurriedly. "The manor." Endless screams and screams were heard. In the building of the manor, several men of the Typica family in white suits surrounded Yuri and the butler Edgar, running down the stairs quickly. One of them kept listening to the situation from the walkie-talkie. "Damn it, only one person. You let him break into the house. Has your physical strength been drained by the women here? These two families are not human beings. They are as agile as hounds, and they are so accurate. Almost all of our men were killed in an instant. Try to hold him before we send the young master away. Even if you die, you have to hold him." Ah. Click. The walkie-talkie suddenly gave out a harsh sound of electric current and lost the voice of the opponent. "Ike, respond. Ike." The man looked at the walkie-talkie in his hand with an ugly face. He knew what happened. "Go quickly," Edgar said calmly. "Don't let the sacrifice be in vain." But the old butler was also a little worried. Although this manor was not like the headquarters of the Typica family in Morocco, at least there were a lot of bodyguards here. It was just an intruder who didn't need to escort the master away. Edgar thought so before. However, in a short period of time, the invaders seemed to have entered a no-man's land as they killed their way in and continuously broke through the manor's defensive line. Thus, Edgar had no choice but to prioritize Yuri's safety. "Sir, why haven't you put on the bulletproof vest?" Edgar glanced at Yuri at this time. After he pulled Yuri out of the study, he found that Yuri was not in a good state. The old butler even sensed some strange emotions from him. That was, Yuri was not afraid at this time. Even he didn't seem to be in a good state. It was as if the approaching danger was nothing to him. Yuri said slowly, "No need. Anyway, it's just a matter of time for me to escape or not. I just want to know who broke in." Bang. Chapter 297. Carrying the Benelli M1 on his shoulder, the man who broke the door looked at Yuri and his companions who were rushing down the stairs. It seems that he finally found the right person. Tianbai sneered, "This manor is really big." As he spoke, Tianbai suddenly shifted his body. In that split second, a bullet brushed past him and hit the door behind him. Tianbai instantly waved the Benelli M1 in his hand and pulled the trigger without looking at the position. At the moment when he shot, a figure was shot into a hornet's nest with blood dripping. Benelli M1. The power of the shotgun was too horrible. "Take the young master away, Mr. Edgar," the head of the bodyguards of the Typica family said quickly, and together with several companions, they crazily suppressed the man. "Tianbai with firepower! Go to hell!" A bodyguard of the Typica family directly bit off the safety pin of the grenade and threw it towards Tianbai. Tianbai's eyes narrowed. Instead of retreating, he used the Benelli M1 in his hand like a baseball bat and accurately hit the grenade flying toward him. It hit the target. The grenade flew back. Bang! The power of the explosion directly blew up a staircase. At the moment of the explosion, the butler quickly threw Yuri to the ground, but the airflow and loud sound of the explosion made him dizzy. Yuri climbed up from the ground, shaking his head, but still seeing stars. The tinnitus made him feel that everything in front of him seemed to be shaking, but he could clearly see that those bodyguards fell down one by one and turned into badly mutilated corpses. He saw Edgar, who fell on the ground. The old man pushed him and blocked the impact of the airflow for him, but now he was motionless, and Yuri didn't know whether he was dead or alive. "Who are you?" Yuri took a deep breath at this moment. Was he afraid? He himself didn't know either, but it was clear that the most basic of human instincts still made his voice become nervous. But Tianbai was obviously not interested in talking more. He raised the Benelli M1 in his hand, aiming at Yuri directly. Yuri could only retreat in panic, but finally pushed against the wall. Finding that he had no way back, He couldn't help sweating. Wait. At this moment, a voice that did not belong to this place suddenly rang out. When they looked towards the source of the sound, they saw a huge figure slowly walking in through the door that had been broken open by Tianbai. Yuri instantly saw the man's appearance clearly. He opened his eyes wide and gritted his teeth. F.M. Seeing Yuri for the first time, F.M. frowned, then looked around and snorted, "It's really you! I knew it. That bitch Anna must be lying to me. She didn't kill you. Humph. What's more, I didn't expect that you, a poor tramp, could become a member of the Typica family. But," F.M. sneered, "no matter who you are, I'll take your life now." Yuri was stunned. However, he suddenly had an idea. "Wait, I'm not the heir of the Typica family," he said quickly. "I'm just a substitute for that guy. He's the one who wants to deal with you." "Substitute?" F.M. frowned. "Where's the real heir?" While counting, F.M. took a pistol from Tianbai with a cruel face. "If you dare to say you don't know, then go to hell. I'll send you to see your old lover." "Wait." Yuri swallowed his saliva, saying quickly, "I can take you to him. I know where he is. But you have to let me go. Really. Or else he can escape from this place right away." F.M. suddenly narrowed his eyes. But Tianbai beside him suddenly said, "Mr. F.M., I don't want to waste time. If the person you want to kill leaves, we won't continue to help you find him. You have to leave Moscow before dawn." "Yuri, I hope you won't let me down." F.M. narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Or I'm afraid you have to bear my anger before I leave." Yuri took a deep breath and nodded. Tianbai waved his hand and said, "You go ahead, don't play any tricks." Yuri could only turn around, but he knew that the Benelli M1 shotgun was pointed at his back. Follow me." Yelgo easily saw a guy lying on the ground on the road. He might be a man of the manor. He looked at the bloody hole in the man's forehead, subconsciously thinking of a phrase. One-shot kill. What the hell happened? Yelgo frowned, but quickly reached out and turned over the man's body. Therefore, baby Yelgo easily picked up the equipment on the road. Pistol. He didn't know the situation of the manor, so he could only try to protect himself. Victor. Mr. Victor. He thought of Victor, who was taken away without any news, and worried that he might still be trapped somewhere in the manor. So he gritted his teeth and followed the corpses on the road all the way. All of a sudden, Yelgo heard a loud noise. This kind of explosion might be caused by a powerful weapon, perhaps a hand grenade or something like that. Is this family crazy? How did the security check work? How could they let people pass with such a dangerous thing? Yelgo, who complained in his heart, rushed to the place where the explosion sound came from. But he didn't expect to see a scene that made him feel a little scared on the way. It was a man wearing a black hood. At this moment, he was holding the neck of a man in a white suit with one hand and lifting the other person's body so easily. At the same time, the man in the black hood aimed the automatic rifle at the man in the white suit's chest and shot it out. The bodyguard of the Typica family in the white suit screamed in pain, and his body was thrown to the ground casually. The man in the black hood slowly turned his face, looking at the flustered Yelgo in the corridor. He twisted his neck and said indifferently, "Is there anyone left?" "Just in time. I don't need to look for it." Yelgo quickly raised the pistol in his hands, pointing at the man, and shouted in a deep voice, "Put down your weapon! I'm an agent of the 3rd police station. Now I order you to put down your weapon." "Agent." Tianzue was confused, but he shook his head. "No matter what, we have to clean it up." He walked slowly to Yelgo, calmly and indifferently. "Your hands are shaking. You said you're an agent. Have you ever shot anyone?" "Stop. Put down your weapon. I'm going to shoot." "Ah." The young investigator gritted his teeth and pulled the trigger abruptly. Bang, bang, bang. 3 bullets were shot on the floor in front of Tianzue, raising a lot of dust, but they didn't hurt Tianzue at all. "You're really a rookie." Tianzue shook his head, but his body suddenly rushed forward with extremely fast movements. Tenzue easily punched Yelgo's abdomen, which made Yelgo squat down painfully. Tenzue snorted, grabbing Yelgo's hair, and pointed the automatic rifle at Yelgo's forehead instantly. Unexpectedly, at the same time, Yelgo grasped the barrel of the automatic rifle and tried to stop it from pointing. Well, Tenzue felt a great strength from Yelgo. He couldn't point the muzzle at this guy, but for Tenzue, killing people didn't necessarily need bullets. He snorted, and his knee hit Yelgo's abdomen again. Then he turned around and went to Yelgo's back and strangled Yelgo's neck with the rifle in his hand. While strangling, he stepped back, dragging Yelgo's body and sliding on the floor. Yelgo could only kick his legs in pain, but he couldn't open the gun barrel on his neck. The fear of his throat being broken made his pupils dilate quickly. Finally, the threat of death made him put aside some scruples. He didn't struggle, but directly grasped Tenzue's hands in front of him. Yelgo suddenly roared. His clothes were directly torn at this moment. He threw the guy with a black headache right in front of him. Ah! Yelgo even punched Tenzue's back heavily. He could even feel the bones in Tenzue's back were broken. Seeing that this guy finally fell to the ground motionlessly, Yelgo gasped for breath and collapsed on the ground. Under the light of the corridor, a layer of fine hair began to emerge on Yelgo's face, arms, back and chest exposed by the torn clothes. Yelgo raised his head and calmed himself down. He only felt a kind of beast was crazily spreading in his body, making him extremely painful. He grasped his arms and uttered an extremely painful cry. He didn't notice that Tenzue, who fell to the ground, strangely moved his body at this time. He got up. Tenzue's voice was a little low and weak. "You're actually a wolf? No wonder you have such great strength. But it seems that you can't control yourself well." Yelgo raised his head and opened his mouth like a wild beast. His sharp canine teeth were exposed, showing that he was like an injured and hungry wolf. But Tenzue suddenly took out a small iron box from his lapel, opened it, and took out a small syringe with a syringe, saying slowly, "Since you're a wolf, there's no other way. If possible, I don't want to use this kind of thing after all." Tenzue directly inserted the syringe into his neck. Injection. In the syringe, the light blue liquid was injected into Tenzue's body. Just in a moment, Tenzue's eyes suddenly turned upside down, and a lot of blood vessels protruded on his face. He seemed to be enduring a great deal of pain as well. He also let out a low growl. The muscles on his body swelled up in an instant. But anyway, the feeling of this power is wonderful. Tenzue's body seemed to be bigger. He suddenly jumped up and fell in front of Yelgo, punching toward Yelgo's head. Bang! It was a figure that flew out from the corridor, and then another figure rushed out from the corridor, and the two were soon entangled together. Well, it seemed that this kind of medicine was the standard for the members of Michael Club. Looking at the two inhuman bodies entangled with each other, Boss Luo couldn't help but think with interest. But although it was interesting, and even interesting to see the duel between the drug man of Michael Club and the wild werewolf agent, the boss of the club directly went into the interior of the manor. In fact, Luaccio just thought that the two guys would fight for a long time, and Anna, who followed behind Luaccio and Yuyi, had no time to be frightened by the scene in front of her, so she quickly followed them. At first, she just didn't want to die like this and let all her efforts be in vain. But when she looked at it from a bystander's point of view, she knew that there were some things that she needed to do. Chapter 298. Did the terrorists of Chechen come here? It had been a few minutes since Vicar entered the manor. Since he entered the manor, he had a creepy feeling. Are you scared when you see the tragic dead bodies on the way? But Vera didn't seem to be afraid at all. Even though Vicar knew that there was something inhuman about this woman, he couldn't help persuading her. "Miss Vera! You've seen the situation here. Let's retreat." Unexpectedly, Vera frowned at this moment. She sniffed in the air. "I smell something disgusting." Vicar looked at the dead body on the ground and nodded subconsciously. Indeed, I also hate the bloody smell. Wait, where are you going? But he could only hear Vera calmly say, I'm talking about the path of the wolf. Wolves? Vicar gave a start, and then his face changed greatly as if he thought of something. You mean wolves? But he didn't need Vera to give him any answer, because in the next moment a figure indeed broke the wall and rolled on the ground, right in front of Vera and Vicar. It was a werewolf with hair all over his body, as if he had lost his mind. His hands and feet were on the ground, raising his head and grinning. What's this? However, another huge figure slowly walked out of the broken wall at this time. This appearance made Vicar subconsciously think of a miniature version of the Hulk. Is there anyone else in the way? The giant suddenly said with a rough voice. It seemed that he was in a rage, and his voice was like the roar of a prisoner trapped in prison. Obviously, this giant also saw Vicar and Vera. Vicar, you hide first. Vera said calmly at this time, and her pupils gradually changed color. Where are you taking us? Yuri didn't say a word all the way, and Efim had lost his patience. 1 minute. If you can't take us there in 1 minute, you'll go to hell. We've arrived. Yuri, who was covered with cold sweat, turned his head slightly. Out of the corner of his eyes, he could only see Efim and another man with horrible fighting ability. It's the room in front. There's a secret passage in this manner for the convenience of escape. Tianbai nodded, ordering directly, Open the door. Yuri nodded, slowly opening the door of this room. It was a study room. Where's the escape passage? Efim asked at this time. Yuri pointed at the desk in the study room. The mechanism is on the desk. Do you see the desk lamp? Move the desk lamp, and you can see the button. The passage is behind the bookcase. Efim narrowed her eyes and suddenly said, Very well, move the desk lamp now. Seeing Yuri's hesitation look, Efim pointed the back of his head and said in a low voice, Go! Yuri could only raise his hands, slowly walking toward the desk step by step. When he came to the desk, Yuri turned around and looked at Efim and Tianbai. A drop of cold sweat began to slide down from his hair to his neck. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Hurry up! Tianbai snorted, pulling the Benelli M1 in his hand, and the sound of loading was unusually loud. Right at this time, Yuri squatted down, hiding himself under the desk, and opened a drawer of the desk where there was a pistol. In fact, there were weapons hidden in many secret corners of this manor, but as a fake heir, it was impossible for him to know where they were. But obviously, he had found the pistol in the study room long ago. Yuri held the pistol and gasped for breath. He tried his best to calm himself down. How dare you cheat? The sound of footsteps was approaching him step by step. Ah! Yuri suddenly shouted, rushing out from the side of the desk, and pulled the trigger of the pistol. Bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Anna had unknowingly rushed to the front of Luaccio, and Yuri, running forward quickly, but she soon stopped, because she finally found that she had overtaken the club boss and Miss Servant Girl. This might be the last thing she wanted, but she had to admit it. Can't you walk faster? Miss Anna, Luaccio said calmly, are you sure you want the next product? Mr. Yuri has less than a month to live. Are you sure you want to use part of your soul to exchange for the money to help him survive this crisis? If I continue to make requests, you will be able to obtain my soul faster. Isn't that what you want to see the most? Anna sneered at this time. Luaccio shook his head. No, I mean, Miss Anna, you can use the remaining money to buy something better for you. For example, lifespan. Looking at Anna, Luaccio said indifferently, Miss Anna, you should know that you should be dead, and the reason why you are still alive is that your soul exchange fee is consumed every second. I mean, the more you use, the less lifespan you can buy. Of course, for a person who is supposed to die, even if she uses her soul, the lifespan won't be much. But because of this, the soul exchange fee is particularly precious. Seeing Anna was silent, Luocio said slowly, "For example, if you can buy 3 years of lifespan, but after these consumption, you only have 2 years left." "Of course. I'm just giving an example." "Yes. Confirmed. Decided. Can you act now?" "I see." Luocio nodded. "Then I'll act according to your wish." Luocio passed by Anna, but he didn't move forward even one step. There was a closed door in front of him, but he just raised his hand at this time. Slowly, he changed the situation inside the door. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang. Only to hear 5 consecutive gunshots in the room. At the moment of the gunshots, Anna suddenly turned back, looking at the door. When the gunshots had completely quieted down, Anna nervously clenched her hands and put them in front of her lips. It was very quiet, very quiet. How much time had passed? She didn't have the courage to move forward even one step, let alone to open the door in front of her. She just looked. How much time had passed? Only to hear a click. That was the sound of the door lock being unlocked, and a figure slowly appeared. "Open the door, close the door," that was Yuri. His face was covered with blood, drop by drop, like the paint from the paintbrush. His eyes were empty, and the gun in his hand was pointed vertically at the ground. He walked like this, step by step, as if he was dragging his own body. He could only see this corridor, even if there were 3 other figures in this corridor. But no matter Luocio, the maid, or even Anna, they were all in a state of being invisible. He still walked like this step by step. He didn't know that someone was watching him when he passed by Anna. She knew that he couldn't see her, so she stretched out her palm, wanting to stroke the scattered hair on his face or wipe the blood on his face. But she didn't dare. Her fingers stopped in the air. She let him walk by her like this, like a walking dead, until he finally disappeared in this corridor. She got through this danger, until she covered her lips with both hands, trying to block the cry, until she weakly leaned against the wall, until she looked at Luocio, saying sadly like a child, "How I want to tell him I never wanted to kill him. How I want to tell him, but I can't let him know. I can't let him know that his revenge is meaningless. Because I know from the moment I chose to shoot, from the moment I met him in front of the art gallery." Chapter 299. It seems to have stopped. Or it didn't stop. Yuri didn't know. He just subconsciously walked into the studio. The second painting, The Nameless Maiden, was painted here. In fact, he had spent a lot of time here before the start of the second auction. Yuri grabbed a bottle of wine that he didn't know the name of. After biting open the oak cork, he drank it quickly and fiercely. He sat down on the chair. About 30 minutes or 40 minutes ago, he was taken away by Edgar from here. But now, Efim was dead, and the man with the hood, whose name he didn't even know, was also dead. In this manner, probably many people died. Yuri slowly closed his eyes. A few minutes ago, the scene of shooting and killing people flashed through his mind. "You dare to cheat." Efim snorted. He also thought that this guy would play some tricks. But compared with that, Efim hoped that Yuri could take him to find the heir of the Typica family, the guy who made him fall into such a situation. "You're dead." Efim snorted. Tianzue didn't say anything. Compared with Efim, he was more willing to clean up the obstacles and send Efim, who was like a human-shaped wild boar, away in the shortest time to complete the task. The loaded Benelli M1 shotgun was pointed straight at the desk. For him, there was no need to wait for the person to be exposed. The split bullets were enough to directly penetrate the person and the desk. Killing people was more like a daily behavior for him. When he was hungry, he needed to eat. When he needed to kill, then he would kill. With a slight pull of his finger, he had already felt the backward movement of the trigger. At this time, Yuri suddenly roared and rushed out from behind the desk. "He's quite brave," Tenzue faintly thought. But even so, this guy would be shot into a hornet's nest. It's so boring, this delivery task. In an instant, Tenzue thought of many things, but at the same time his entire body was filled with an unprecedented fear. He didn't know where this feeling of fear came from. The only thing he knew was that his body, from his eyelids to his finger that was pulling the trigger, had completely stiffened at this moment. His body was also stiff. Only his thoughts at this time seemed to accelerate infinitely, reaching a state of high-speed operation. But he still couldn't move his body. He could even clearly see the bullet fired from Yuri's pistol and then accurately shot between his eyes. He felt pain, an experience that he had never experienced before. The things that appeared in Heavenly Crime's mind seemed to have reached their limits at this moment. Finally, he thought of the essence of the situation, a revolving door. Every movement seemed to have been slowed down countless times. Tianzui's body fell straight backwards. The moment he landed, the elasticity of his muscles even made his body bounce slightly. It raised the dust hidden in the carpet of the study. Bang, bang, bang. 3 or 4 gunshots. This was the last sound he heard in this world. Why couldn't he move? He didn't know. He only knew that the lighting on the ceiling of this study seemed to be quite beautiful. Tianzui died. Where was FM? At this time, FM opened his eyes wide, and his hands subconsciously covered his stomach. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't block the bright red liquid that flowed out of his body. His body suddenly twitched. He stretched out his hands, seeming to find something to support his body, but he didn't find it. Yes, he didn't find it, so he fell to the ground. One of the bullets even penetrated his chest. FM opened his eyes wide. That was a kind of terrifying look before death. In fact, he couldn't see anything, only darkness in front of him. But he could feel that Yuri was beside him. FM suddenly grabbed Yuri's clothes with his blood-stained palms and pulled them. Both of their eyes were extremely wide open. Their heavy auras were like gunpowder that could explode at any moment, like needles against wheat. You won't have a good time. My end. Blood gushed out from FM's mouth. Is your end. I curse you. I curse you. Yuri abruptly opened his eyes. FM's eyes seemed to be less than 10 centimeters away from his eyes before he died, as if he was still watching him. Both of them are dead. He held his forehead with his hand and suddenly laughed. His laughter was low and deep, and as he laughed, it seemed to turn into the sound of crying. My end is your end. This sentence actually came true. It wouldn't take long for Yuri to know that he would close his eyes forever. He suddenly recalled the day he came to the city, and then the days after that, one day after another. If one were to say that he really had a talent, then perhaps it was this talent that had caused all of this. Was there no shortcut to success? Was Anna abominable? But if he hadn't come to the city for more than a year and was still mediocre and eager for a chance, he wouldn't have agreed to fake it so easily. Blame himself? Was he wrong? Should he be a street painter down to earth? Would he succeed in the end? But now his enemies were all dead, and he didn't have much life left. What could he do with the remaining time? Enjoy crazily, and enjoy the life of a rich man to the extreme before he died? Then how painful would it be before he died? Counting his remaining time day by day. How painful would it be? Suddenly, Yuri absent-mindedly raised the pistol that was still in his hand. He knew there was still a bullet left here, and his gaze was like a patient suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Slowly, Yuri opened his mouth and gradually inserted the muzzle into his temple. He finally closed his eyes and then buckled his fingers. In the face of counting down his life, he chose to end himself. Bang! It was over. It was over. But he could still open his eyes, and there was no pain as he imagined. He could still see everything around him so clearly. Yuri subconsciously turned his head. He realized that a palm had appeared on his face at some point in time, and the owner of the palm was the boss of the club. The power of this 6-magazine pistol is indeed not bad. From Boss Luo's palm, a bullet slowly fell to the ground. Yuri subconsciously looked at the bullet that fell to the ground and couldn't help but reveal a trace of anger. Why did you stop me? You can take away my soul without waiting for the end of the time. Don't you want to? If you peek into the future, neither you nor I will know. Luocio said softly, what will happen in the future will be known. For example, overlay transaction. What? Yuri showed a blank look. At this time, Luocio gently snapped his fingers, and Yuri closed his eyes and directly fell to the ground. At this time, Anna slowly walked out from behind Luocio. She squatted down and reached out to touch Yuri's face. It seems that Miss Anna really loves Mr. Yuri. She even made such a request. Luocio said softly. Anna raised her head and shook it. Do you know what love is? Luocio gave a start. It seemed to be the first time that someone asked him such a question. He shook his head directly. Really? Anna smiled slowly. But I think I shouldn't love this man, but anyway, I feel that I owe him. Anna took a deep breath. Isn't it ridiculous? I clearly know that before all this happened, his love for me. I thought I could let myself fall in love with him, at least as a compensation, or just a response. But later I understood that this was not love at all, and I shouldn't be loved. I just felt guilty. She stood up. Then I planned to do something to really compensate him. Since I should have died, and FM finally died in Yuri's hands, although it was a bit different from what I expected. Anna shook her head. You know what? I actually had a lot of chances to kill FM directly. She showed a very coquettish smile. After all, in my opinion, this guy was still very obsessed with my body, but killing him directly was not what I wanted. If he died, the mining area would only have one owner at most. If there was no way to dig out the connection between the owner and the mining area, and let the public opinion of this country completely wash away the filth between them, the next one would come after the death of FM, and there would be no end at all. But since FM died, I should also die, then let's put an end to this matter. Anna looked at Yuri on the ground, faintly saying, after all, he's just a poor person who was implicated. He can actually pursue his own dream. And I believe that with his talent, as long as he's given enough time, he'll shine and become a very good painter. You can also choose to achieve your original goal. Boss Luo suddenly said. Anna chuckled. She just felt ridiculous. You're really a weirdo. You've repeatedly provided me with choices that I shouldn't refuse for the sake of my interests. You seem to be very willing to see me make all the choices that are beneficial to me. Luocio said indifferently, because we're on the side of customers. Then you're a failure as a boss. Anna shook her head. Some things, people just like to do things that harm themselves and benefit others. I see. Luocio nodded. He slightly opened his hands in front of him, and an old sheepskin scroll appeared out of thin air. It slowly floated to Anna and then opened. If Miss Anna feels there's no problem with the requirements on the contract, you can sign it. Anna gently pressed her palm on the contract. Master, are you unhappy? Miss Maid saw that her master was a little bit silent at this time. She accompanied Luocio to stand at the highest position of the manor and watched what happened below for several minutes. But Boss Luo didn't say a word. The thoughtful Miss Maid quickly thought that he could always intervene in some subtle things to make some changes in the previous time. But this time, he didn't seem to intervene too much. Unhappy? Luocio turned his head and looked at Yi curiously. Why? Miss Maid said softly, because the quality of Miss Anna's soul hasn't changed much since the moment she was rescued. If I have to say, it's even decreased a little, right? Luocio smiled. We've been together for some time. I'm not the type to scold you when I hear something bad. Yes, Master's tolerance towards me is something that makes me happy. Yi softly responded and then hesitated, but Miss Anna's contract, of course, according to the customer's request. Luocio slowly said, First of all, deal with the matter of this manor. Boss Luo seemed to cheer up all of a sudden, chuckling. At the beginning, I thought that the werewolf and the medicine man wouldn't be finished so quickly. Not only that, but also a new character. Yi casually looked at Tianbai, Yelgo, and Vera on the ground. She didn't think there was anything interesting about this ridiculous fighting force. However, since her master was showing an expression of interest, as an excellent maid, she should accompany him, be happy with him, and even give him some entertainment. "Master, look, this Miss Vera seems to have learned Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Her movements are—" For Vera, encountering such an obviously abnormal guy was not something to be happy about, especially when there was another person in the group. Well, perhaps he was also the kind of guy who couldn't control the wolf bloodline in his body well. He should have completely lost his mind now. Vera quickly looked at Yelgo, who was completely in a beast state, and then looked at the giant in front of her. This is too exciting. Vera quickly shuttled through the manor. Yes, she had memorized the structure of this manor when she was here last time. Obviously, she didn't get lost this time. But what was worse than getting lost was that she had to fall into a weird, chaotic fight with the giant and the wolf who had lost his mind. However, she had no choice but to admit that she was the weakest among the three of them if she did not use the power that she thought was dirty when facing the strange giant that possessed inhuman strength and the wolf that had lost its rationality. If you weren't a wolf, I wouldn't care about this matter. Vera quickly glanced at the guy who pounced on the giant and crazily bit him, frowning and thinking. Then where was it? The studio. Chapter 300. Police Station. The man lowered his head and sat on the simple bed in the detention room. These days were like a nightmare for him. As the heir of the Typica family, he was caught here. If the news spread, it would be a big joke. Suddenly, the door of the detention room opened. The man looked at the policeman who came in. He couldn't remember the number of times he shouted these days. At this moment, he just looked at the policeman silently with a rather lazy attitude. "You can go now," the policeman said indifferently. The man was stunned and suddenly stood up from the bed, saying with surprise, "I can go now? Is there someone coming to pick me up?" "Pick you up? Who will pick you up?" The policeman shrugged. "It's just that the real thief was caught." "Well, don't talk nonsense. Hurry up and go. Don't waste our space." The man suddenly got angry. "You caught the wrong person. How dare you?" But he had to stop talking immediately because the policeman knocked on the door with his baton. "If you want to stay here, I'll be happy to close the door again." "Wait, I'll go now. This police station, I'll remember it." The man lowered his head and quickly walked down the stairs of the police station. He felt that he was extremely unlucky. Not only did his wallet, ID card, mobile phone, and so on all disappeared, but he also sat in prison for such a long time inexplicably. What the hell is Edgar doing? I've been missing for such a long time. Why didn't he look for me? Humph. He found a taxi, got in, and gave an address in an extremely displeased manner. For Vera! Being a busybody seemed to be a gene passed down from her ancestors. She even clearly remembered that when she was a child, people in her family all commented on her grandmother like this. "Damn, busybody old woman." This time, she seemed to think that she had to pay the bill for being a busybody. This situation was really terrible. This studio, which seemed to have been set up not long ago, now looked like it had been hit by a typhoon. Two guys with extraordinary physical strength were fighting here, and she, a busybody, was sandwiched between them. Vera thought that the owner of this manor wouldn't ask her for compensation. Bang! Damn it! She crossed her arms in front of her to protect herself, barely blocking the fist of this giant. However, the huge impact immediately sent her flying towards the wall. If it weren't for the dirty blood in his body that made his body structure different from that of ordinary people, this punch would have broken the bones in his hands. But now he had lost all feeling from his wrists to his shoulders. Basically, he was numb from his wrists to his shoulders. Pa! Tap! Her body fell directly on top of a cabinet placed on the wall and smashed it into pieces. This seemed to be a place used to store painting tools. Broken brushes, crushed paint, and bottles were scattered all over the floor. A sticky feeling made Vera feel extremely uncomfortable. She subconsciously glanced at her own reflection in the shattered glass on the ground. It turned out that because of this, her face was stained with thick white paint. There was a puddle on his nose, a puddle on his left cheek, a puddle on his forehead, and even a puddle on his right eye. Oh, right, there was also a puddle at the corner of his mouth. But now was not the time for her to care about or deal with these things. It was more important to think about how to deal with this giant and this wolf. I shouldn't meddle in other people's business. Vera abruptly stood up and said to herself with extreme dissatisfaction. Then her pupils began to quickly wrap around her body in a miraculous change. His pupils seemed to have been shattered and then reassembled, turning into a marvelous umbrella-shaped structure with a unique sense of beauty. As for his cheeks, tiny silver hairs appeared. Her ears were slightly elongated, but her hair had suddenly grown to her waist. "Are you also a wolf?" Tianbai's voice was full of a kind of rough, as if his vocal cords were burned, and he was furious. This change was not something he could control. He had to sacrifice a lot of things to exchange for a strong physical ability. A ruthless killing intent had already broken out of his heart. He needed to tear apart all the living things in front of him to calm down the endless impulse in his body. At this time, just at the moment when Vera changed, Yelgo, who had lost his mind, suddenly stopped, as if facing a more dangerous enemy. He bent his body and grasped the floor with his limbs, as if facing a formidable enemy. Or there was a trace of instinctive fear. 10 seconds. Vera's voice suddenly became a little sharper. When her eyes suddenly narrowed, she was like a bullet. In a single leap, she was already charging straight at Tianbai. Tianbai also roared. He had caught the opponent's movement pattern, so his intention was very obvious. That was, he could smash anything with one punch. This punch now indeed had the power to break the wall. However, at this moment, all the movements seemed to be slowed down. Vera did not retreat. Instead, she quickly reached out and grabbed Tianbai's huge wrist. Then her body quickly twisted in the air, and she opened her legs at the same time, and then tightened them instantly. Her left calf and right thigh turned into slender pliers, directly clasping Tianbai's neck. She shouted in a low voice and directly pulled Tianbai down to the ground. As for Tianbai's head, it directly hit the floor heavily. Even though such a terrifying collision wasn't able to shatter Tianbai's skull, he was already seeing stars. But Vera obviously did not stop. She tightened her legs even more ferociously, and at the same time grabbed Tianbai's arm and suddenly pushed it in the opposite direction. Crack! The joint was completely twisted because of this. Tianbai began to feel that it was difficult to maintain his breathing. In this state, although he had reduced his pain to almost no degree, he still needed oxygen to maintain himself. Ordinary people could not force him to this extent, but Vera was obviously not an ordinary person. Strangle, a more powerful move in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and the time was 9 seconds. Vera loosened her legs and stood up from the ground. She roared in a low voice, lifted her leg, and kicked Tianbai over. After seeing his completely white eyes, she turned to look at Yelgo. He was still in a defensive posture with his body tightened. Vera walked towards Yelgo step by step, and the change in her body became more and more obvious. Yelgo instinctively retreated until he had nowhere to retreat. The hidden fierceness in his body finally made him roar, and suddenly attacked Vera. "You don't know how to use this power." Vera's voice became sharper. She held her hands together, easily avoiding Yelgo's collision, and turned to his back. She fiercely hit Yelgo's back with her fist and directly beat him to the ground. Vera snorted coldly and directly knelt on Yelgo's back. Then she stretched out her hand to pull his head and completely suppressed him. "Vicar, come out, come out." Vicar, who had been hiding from the beginning and chasing Vera, now stuck his head out from the window of the studio. Seeing Vera's scene, he suddenly turned pale with fright and hurriedly rummaged through his pocket. Finally, he found a bottle and hurriedly threw it out. Vera stretched out her hand to take the spelling word and directly bit it open. She took out some small pills, stuffed them into Yelgo's mouth, and finally covered his mouth with her strength. Yelgo was still desperately struggling. Listen, anger will not become your power, and it will kill you. I don't know where the blood in your body came from, but since you have this dirty thing in your body, you have to learn to control it. You are a human, not a beast. Woo, ah, roar. Until Yelgo gradually stopped moving, the change in his body began to fade away, and finally closed his eyes. Vera released him and sat on the ground by herself. Suddenly, her face showed a kind of pain, and her lips suddenly became pale. She quickly put the rest of the pills in her hand into her mouth. Soon after, she returned to her original state, but seemed to have overdrawn all her strength and collapsed on the ground. Seeing this, Vicar quickly climbed through the window, walked in, and quickly said, "I just saw a lot of dead people along the way. I didn't see any living ones. What's wrong with this guy?" He immediately shifted his gaze to Tianbai. At this time, Tianbai's body began to become shriveled. Shriveled was relative to his previous huge body size, and now he just returned to his normal laughing state. However, his skin all turned into a strange gray, and even some black substance flowed out from his mouth. Perhaps it was blood? I don't know, but Vera frowned and said weakly, "I seem to have seen something similar. About 2 years ago, several mysterious guys came to our house, and my father received them. They seemed to be talking about some business." Vera shook her head. "Not long after, I accidentally found that our family began to secretly dispose some corpses, which looked—" She was silent for a moment, and then slowly said, "Almost." "Well," Vicar frowned and quickly said, "Don't worry about it. I'll take you out of here first. If there are similar guys, I'm sure I can't deal with them." Vera nodded. She also knew the importance. "Wait, take this guy with you. I have something to ask him." Vera pointed at Yelgo and said, "Miss, do you think I still have the ability to lift this guy with your help?" Vicar said with a bitter face, "You've already helped him to this extent, and the rest depends on his own luck. If he's a member of this manor, he won't die." "Well," Vera had to nod. "Is it because it's an ancient bloodline so it's more powerful?" In the messy studio, Boss Luo and Miss Maid, who were clean, welcomed them. Squatting on the ground, Luocio turned over Yelgo's body and asked while looking at him, "There's a saying of generation in the wolf's community. Yu Yi said what she knew. For example, the first generation is the first generation, and then the first generation is infected by the first generation, and the first generation is infected by the second generation. The previous generation is born with a sense of oppression to the next generation. Well, the pattern of similar bloodline is similar." Luocio walked to the front of Tianbai's body and stretched out his finger to touch some of the black blood on the ground. He rubbed it and suddenly said, "By the way, last time you said that this thing contains the blood of bloodline and the brain of werewolf, right?" "Yes." Luocio nodded. Thinking of what Vera just said, it seemed to be a hypothesis. He smiled and stood up. "It's our turn to clear the place. We should thank Miss Vera, because she saved us some time." It was the first time that Luocio encountered so many corpses, or in other words, he stood in a place where many people died. In the past, even if he wouldn't be scared, he would probably become nervous. But now these were like props, and the spring water in his heart had no ripples. Boss Luo couldn't help but think that it was interesting and self-deprecating. It seems that even the process of getting used to it has been eliminated. Yes, Yu Yi smiled slightly. But before clearing the place, Miss Maid took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped the black blood on Boss Luo's finger. At this time, a taxi slowly came to the entrance of the manor. Chapter 301. But the old taxi driver obviously didn't believe such an excuse. He rolled down the window and looked at the man suspiciously. "Sir, what if you don't come out after going in? What should I do? You don't look like a person who can live here." The old taxi driver was stopped at the entrance of the police station, so he couldn't help but be suspicious. "What did you say?" "I'm the owner here." "Humph." The man frowned and snorted, "You wait." After that, he walked directly to the pillar in front of the gate and pressed the doorbell. If he hadn't lost everything on him, he wouldn't have taken a taxi back. On the way here, he borrowed the phone from the driver, but he couldn't get through to Edgar's phone, which made him uneasy. The doorbell rang for a while, but there was no response. The taxi driver had already gotten out of the car and walked towards the man. "Sir, I think no matter how long you press the button, there won't be a response. However, a free taxi isn't so easy to sit in, do you know? What do you want to do?" The man snorted. Perhaps it was because he had always been in a high position, but after this shout the taxi driver's expression suddenly changed and he instantly stopped in his tracks. The man felt that his momentum had overwhelmed the other party, so he couldn't help but sneer. Unexpectedly, at this time, the taxi driver turned around and ran back to his car without saying a word. He directly reversed the car, turned around, and drove away at full speed. The man was stunned. He didn't think that he could frighten people to this extent. The man subconsciously turned around and saw that on the iron gate of the gate there was a guy in a white suit, but his body was stained with blood. He was lying there. His arm passed through the iron gate, just enough to support his body, but his head was hanging down, and his body was motionless. Seeing this, the man was suddenly frightened. He suddenly understood why the driver left so hurriedly. The man gathered his courage and walked to the front of the gate, holding up the man's head. Soon he recognized his name. What happened in the manor? This was something he desperately wanted to know. The man pushed hard and found that the gate wasn't locked. He couldn't help but hesitate for a moment. He gritted his teeth and took a pistol from the corpse's hand. After swallowing his saliva, he slowly entered the manor. Along the way, the man saw many corpses, and these corpses were all the corpses of his subordinates. The luxurious villa in the manor was extremely quiet. Pushing open the door, he didn't see anyone. The man couldn't help but shout, "Edgar! Edgar! Are you there? Edgar! Are you there?" Boom! As if he had bumped into something, the man abruptly turned around and pointed the pistol in front of him. He shouted, "Who is it?" "Ah, young master." She saw a man holding her arm, leaning against the corner, and slowly standing up. "You're okay, that's great. Oh, I've finally seen a living one." The man's face lit up, and he hurriedly walked over to support the guy. "Tell me what happened here." However, before he could finish speaking, he heard the familiar voice of his old butler. "Sir, you're here." Edgar hurriedly walked down from the corridor. His clothes were very messy, but his hairstyle didn't seem to be messy. "Fortunately, you're okay. After I woke up, I found the corpses of Ephraim and his subordinates in the study." "Sir, it was you who killed them." "Me." The man was stunned, showing an extremely puzzled expression. His mind seemed to be full of cobwebs, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. "Edgar, listen to me. These days Oh, sir, I don't think it's the right time to talk about this." The old butler said seriously, "I've informed Brubov and told him what happened here. Listen, Mr. Brubov means that he will only give us half an hour to clean this place up properly." "Brubov." The man was even more confused. "Wait, I did come to Moscow this time to see Brubov for cooperation, but when did I see him?" "Oh, my poor sir. Didn't you talk with Brubov before the first auction and make a plan to kill Ephraim?" The old butler frowned at this time. "Is it because of the impact caused by the explosion of the grenade that confused your memory?" The man was stunned. His intuition told him that something strange happened here that he couldn't explain. He instinctively wanted to find out what happened in the middle and was about to speak. But at this time, he suddenly had a feeling of dizziness. This feeling of dizziness caused many images to flash through his eyes, like a movie, and it was the kind of 120-frame movie. The man then fell into a coma. "Sir, sir, sir." Feeling some pain on his face, Yelgo slowly woke up. The moment he opened his eyes, he even saw a familiar face. Mr. Victor. Yelgo grabbed Victor's arm happily. That's great. You're all right. I've been looking for you. Where the hell did they lock you up? Victor was stunned and subconsciously thought. It seemed that the people in the manor didn't tell Yelgo about his whereabouts, but just locked him up. Calm down. Victor patted Yelgo's shoulder. Let's talk about my matter later. Compared to this, can you tell me what happened here? Oh, I don't know. It seems that this place was attacked, so I escaped in the chaos. I was going to look for you. Yelgo recalled and said, Mr. Victor, there are too many firearms here and many people were killed by the fire. I think we should call for reinforcements as soon as possible. Yelgo. Unexpectedly, Victor shouted a little loudly at this time. Let's talk about those things later. I just need you to tell me what happened to this guy. Victor pointed with his finger. Yelgo couldn't help turning his eyes, only to see a corpse lying on the ground in this chaotic room. His whole body was like a gray mummy, with black blood flowing out of his mouth and blood vessels on his face, which looked extremely horrible. This was the guy who killed people. Yelgo finally clearly remembered something that happened before. This guy seemed to become extremely horrible after he injected something into his body. Yelgo wasn't sure what the man injected into his body was, but it was obviously not a good thing. But how did this guy die? Yelgo couldn't help but feel frightened. He knew that he must have instinctively entered a state that he didn't want others to know because of the excessive danger. Once he entered that state, he would lose his mind and couldn't remember what he had done. Did he kill this guy with that horrible power when he lost his mind? Yelgo looked at some obvious claw marks on this guy's body. It seemed that, perhaps, this was the only conclusion he could draw. Thinking that he would cause some horrible destruction when he lost his mind, Yelgo couldn't deny this conclusion. Did you kill this guy? Victor asked with a frown. Yelgo hesitated. I think, maybe, I don't remember clearly. Sir, I fainted later, so I can't remember. Thank you for your hard work. Victor nodded, but suddenly said, But don't tell anyone about this corpse for the time being, and don't mention it in the report. I'll find someone to deal with this corpse. In short, you have to keep it a secret. Seeing Victor's serious look, Yelgo hesitated for a moment and finally chose to nod. He got up. By the way, Mr. Victor, they didn't do anything to you, right? Victor smiled. He looked at this young guy and knew that he really cared about him. So he couldn't help saying gently, It's okay, everything is solved. It had settled. When Yelgo walked out of the room, he found that a lot of policemen came to the manor. But it seemed that there weren't many corpses as he remembered. Only 4 corpses were placed in the hall of the villa. There was only 1 corpse inside, and it belonged to someone from the manor, and it was only a gardener. As for the other 3, they were Ephim and the 2 gangsters who kidnapped Ephim earlier. What the hell happened? Baby Yelgo was dumbfounded. Do you feel better? Vicar took Vera to a grove far away from the manor and found a stream here. He put her aside to have a rest. In fact, he was really tired. For a warrior whose weapons were keyboards and codes, this kind of physical labor was terrible. I'm okay. Vera nodded and recovered a little strength. Vicar breathed a sigh of relief and suddenly sat on the grass. I heard a siren just now. Maybe the police came. Fortunately, we left quickly, or it would be really troublesome. Thank you for your hard work. I'll give you a raise. Vera smiled and stretched out her fist. Vicar also stretched out his fist and gently knocked on Vera's fist. They looked at each other and smiled. By the way, help me get some water. I want to wipe my face. There was a lot of paint on my face, Vera said as if she thought of something. Although Vicar knew that his boss, who paid his salary, was a person who loved beauty, he still couldn't help but ask, My lady, when did you get paint on your face? At most, it's just a little bit of dust. No. Vera was stunned. She subconsciously touched her face and obviously felt the discomfort and coarseness caused by the paint. Is there really no paint on my face? I'm talking about white paint. No. Vera frowned and then quickly relaxed. She suddenly squinted and said happily, "Ha! I think I know what trick they used to steal the nameless maiden from the gallery, silently." "Ah, you're still thinking about this?" Chapter 302. Yuri felt a headache. As for the reason of the headache, he thought it was probably because he drank too much last night. It seemed that he had become more and more dependent on alcohol recently. But he still didn't open his eyes. He just used his hand to gently press his forehead, and then sniffed the air that filled his surroundings. It was a kind of oppressive and even a little stinky. The salary of the art gallery was very low, and the monthly purchase of paints, brushes, and drawing paper was not a small expense. He could only rent a dull and dark basement like this. It's already so late? Looking up at the alarm clock placed in front of the bed, Yuri had no choice but to hurriedly get up and randomly look for clothes on the ground. The clothes were thrown on the ground like garbage. A single man was probably like this, and a single and poor man was even more like this. He finally found a piece of clothes that didn't smell much. After putting it on casually, he opened the door of the basement. 1 copy of the newspaper, 1 copy of the coffee, 1 copy of the sandwich. The total is, here you are. As usual, Yuri ate his breakfast while getting on the bus to the gallery. He couldn't help but feel a little lucky that he found a place to sit on the bus at this time. The Stolen, the Nameless Maiden is officially hung up today, and the art gallery is also open as usual. When Yuri casually opened the newspaper that night, he was surprised to see such a piece of news on one side. However, regarding the content of the news, he felt as if he had fallen into another world after sleeping for a while. The date of the newspaper was right, it was indeed today. He subconsciously bit his lips. Well, there was pain, so it shouldn't be a dream. But, as an employee who worked in the art gallery, even though he was only responsible for cleaning the outer wall, why didn't he know that the Nameless Maiden was stolen? And it happened many days ago? Damn it! Yuri controlled his temper and read the content of the newspaper all the way. The Nameless Maiden was actually stolen by a very famous counselor in the city. The police got a clue and directly found the stolen painting in the counselor's home. As for the method of theft, it was not reported. Later, the police arrested the councilman, but during the transportation process, the criminal councilman was robbed at gunpoint. At that time, the escaped prisoners and criminals broke into a manor in the suburbs and had a conflict with the owner of the manor. In self-defense, the owner of the manor killed a total of 3 people, including the prisoner, Councilman Ephraim. As for the stolen paintings, they had been returned to the art gallery and were officially reopened to visitors today. What the hell? Yuri really felt that what was written in the newspaper was nonsense. So many things had happened, but he had no recollection of them at all. His head was still a little heavy, which made him wonder if he had been so drunk last night that he had forgotten so many things. But that wasn't right. Even if the video was blacked out, there was no reason to forget what had happened for some time. He subconsciously continued to rub his forehead. The discomfort after waking up from the hangover lasted until the bus arrived at the station. However, when Yuri arrived at the station, he saw that there were many more tourists in front of the art gallery. They were all waiting for the art gallery to open. What's in the newspaper? Is it true? Yuri murmured. Glancing at the time, he found that he had passed the working time. For this reason, he had to do something that he often did. That was to get into the sewer outside the art gallery. It just led to a place inside the art gallery. Of course, the exit over there had been blocked long ago. It was just that he had been cleaning this place for some time and had accidentally discovered this passage. So, anyway, after that, even if he missed the working time, no one noticed that he was late. It seemed that it was time to open the door. Before Yuri had time to go to the staff room to change his work clothes, he was forced to hide aside by the tourists who came in. Yuri, you're here again. At this time, Yuri heard someone calling his name. It was a staff member in the art gallery. His name seemed to be... He forgot it. Anyway, he didn't pay much attention to it. I'm going to change my clothes. But you see, Yuri pointed to the guests. I can't go there at all. But I did come on time. You see, I'm already here. The staff said indifferently, "I don't care whether you're late or not. In fact, even if you're late, I won't care about you. Don't tell me you've forgotten that you've been fired for some time." "What?" I said. "You've been fired. Yuri, I tell you, if you enter the art gallery properly, we won't care about you. But if you continue to sneak in like this, we'll have to call the police next time." The staff said seriously, "Now leave immediately. Don't waste my feelings for you, because we used to work together. Tell me clearly, what fired? Who fired me? I was still at work yesterday. Why did you fire me?" Yuri couldn't help but rush forward. The staff stepped back in disgust. "You stink. How much did you drink? Please, walk on the street when you're sober. Tell me clearly." The staff waved his hand at this time. 2 security guards immediately came up and dragged Yuri out of the art gallery. "Let me go! Let me go!" In front of the art gallery, Yuri was pushed away. One of the security guards said, "Go, go, don't let me see you again. How many times do you think you've seen me this month? Every time you pretend to stand in front of those famous paintings. Do you really think you're an artist? Who will look at those rubbish paintings you usually draw?" "What did you say? Are you going or not? We can start now." The 2 security guards puffed out their chests at the same time. Yuri was stunned and spat angrily. "You're illegally firing me. I'll definitely report you to the labor department." "Wait, bah." Yuri took a deep breath before he turned around and left. He was still in a state of disbelief. Before walking out of the art gallery, Yuri subconsciously looked back and then looked at the newspaper he bought in the morning. He suddenly crumpled the newspaper into a ball and threw it in front of the art gallery, shouting loudly, "Listen! One day I'll hang my paintings inside." "It's okay, oh. Well, my job is okay now. Don't worry, I'm in good health. Girlfriend? I don't have any plans for now. Well, I know, mother. I haven't written to my parents in my hometown for a while." Yuri stood alone under an old building, silently listening to his family's nagging. "Well, I'll stop talking. I'm going to start working. I love you, mother." Yuri put the phone into his pocket. He said he would report to the labor department, but in fact, it was just a waste of time. If he had the energy, he might as well find a new job as soon as possible. He hadn't paid this month's rent yet. The sky above Moscow was still so fresh, just like when he first came here. At that time, he still had dreams. He used up all the money he brought from home, but no one appreciated the works he sold. In the end, he could only paint portraits for passers-by on the streets to earn some living expenses. He remembered that half a year ago, when it was still cold and snowing, he almost froze to death on the streets. He put his hands in his pockets, walking aimlessly on the street, no longer thinking about why he was fired. What he needed to think about was how to continue his life in the future. Dreams can't be eaten. Yuri couldn't remember who had said such words. Perhaps he really didn't have any talent and was only relying on impulse to support the so-called dream. But now he couldn't eat 3 meals and had no clothes and food. It was time to consider giving up his dream. He couldn't remember how he came to this place. Yuri stopped his footsteps. Perhaps because he was too focused on the problem, he actually came to this place again. On one side of the old building with red bricks, Yuri stood like this for a long time, silently looking at the distorted city pattern on the mottled wall. He always felt a little ridiculous. At that time, how did he insist on painting here every day in such a cold winter? But he had an impulse to fill in the last lines that he finally gave up. Anyway, he was free today and didn't need to work. Yuri found a stone on the ground, then walked to the wall and closed his eyes. After a while, he began to work. He used the edges of the stone to draw a series of light, white marks on the wall. When he gave up at that time, it was almost completed. But now he just added some missing things, which seemed to not take much time or a long time. It seems that something is still missing. Suddenly, a slightly low voice came from behind. Yuri subconsciously turned around. only to find that a man had appeared behind him without him noticing. He wore a cap, a mask, and sportswear, probably a morning jogger. But he felt that he had seen this man somewhere before. "Who are you?" The morning jogger's mask shook a little, and he seemed to smile. "Do you have a dream?" "Dream?" Yuri gave a start. The morning jogger said, "Ah, you forgot. Last winter, I asked you why you didn't burn the charcoal in your hand to keep warm in such a cold day." Yuri smiled with a complicated expression. "Now, I think I will burn the charcoal in my hand." The morning jogger seemed to be stunned, and then nodded, whispering, "In that case, it's really a pity." Yuri shrugged, looking up at this huge graffiti, and said indifferently, "Not necessarily. Anyway, no one will like this thing." "I won't disturb you," the morning jogger said politely. Yuri nodded subconsciously, and when the morning jogger was about to turn around, he subconsciously stopped him. "Wait, can you do me a favor?" "Mister, what's the matter?" Yuri didn't know whether it was an illusion or not, but he felt that the other party's voice was a little cold. But he didn't care too much. "If possible, can you help me?" "Help?" "Yes, a little to the left, a little more. Okay, right here. Don't move. I'll be done soon." Under the old wall, the morning jogger stretched out his shoulder, and Yuri rode on his shoulder so that he could reach a higher position on the wall. He took out some paint tubes from his clothes. This was his habit. He always had some with him. At this time, he squeezed out all the paint from the tube and painted it on the upper left corner of the graffiti with his finger. Lemon yellow. A circle. A sun. A bright yellow sun on the twisted city. Darkness and sunlight looked very strange. But after putting down Yuri, the morning jogger gazed at it for a long time. He suddenly whispered, "Mister, I think you're wrong. That is, it won't be unloved, at least I like it. I think it's finally perfect day." Yuri smiled. "You're really a weird person." He shook his head. "I don't want to talk with you. I'm going to find a new job. Otherwise, I don't even have charcoal next time. Goodbye. I'm glad to meet you again." "Mister, may I know your name?" "Yuri, my name is Yuri." "Do you like to draw?" Yuri was silent for a while and shook his head. "I'm not too sure now." The morning jogger suddenly opened his lapel and took out a pen. "Give me your hand." He wrote a phone number on Yuri's palm and told him, "I have a friend who also likes to draw. You can communicate with him. By the way, I suggest you can learn from him." "Well, you can say it's Vladimir Mirovich, an old friend of his in judo class." "Judo! I hope to see your work in the future." The morning jogger said indifferently, "Mr. Yuri." "So it's a rich man." Yuri looked at the phone number written on his palm and watched the morning jogger get on a black car. Isn't the driver a bit too strong? Should be a bodyguard. Yuri thought for a while and felt that it was okay to call this number, so he dialed the number on his palm. "Hello, this is Repin Academy of Fine Arts. I'm Professor Apulum. How can I help you?" Yuri patted his face, subconsciously. Repin Academy of Fine Arts. Former Royal Academy of Fine Arts. Apulum. This is the authority of the art circle. Vladimir Mirovich. Vladimir Mirovich. Judo. Yuri's heart suddenly beat violently. Could it be him? I'm actually riding on his shoulder. Yuri suddenly turned around, looking at the graffiti on the wall. He suddenly felt that he might be favored by the god of luck today. "Hello? Hello? Hello? Is anyone there?" "Ah, hello, I'm here. I'm here. I'm here. My name is Yuri. Professor Apulum. I'm sorry to call you. Here's the thing, there's a..." Luaccio was reading the contents of the parchment in his hand softly. "First, let Mr. Yuri forget everything about you and FM and restore his memory to the time before he knew you. Done. Second, give him a chance to pursue his dream. Done. Thirdly, Mr. Yuri can once again enjoy a maximum of 25 years of lifespan. Well, I'm sorry, Miss Anna, but Mr. Yuri has already made a deal with us before, and your soul transaction fee is not enough to buy back his soul. Even his lifespan can only be increased to 25 years. Gently rolling up the parchment in his hand, Luaccio looked at Anna with a smile in this house that originally belonged to Oleg and softly said, "Excuse me, is the above in line with what Miss Anna wants?" "That's enough." Anna nodded gently. She looked very calm, so calm that it seemed that there was no difference whether she opened or closed her eyes. And at this time she slowly closed her eyes. She knew what was waiting for her next. Death. The soul belonged to the other party. She didn't know what the soul looked like, but she knew about death. But after waiting for a while, Anna didn't feel anything wrong with her body. This made her open her eyes in confusion. "Miss Anna, I'm curious about one thing." Luaccio asked softly. "You said that when Efim and the curator of the art gallery conspired to steal the nameless maiden, they actually used a kind of fading paint. Well, the curator secretly painted this special paint on the real painting during the daily maintenance of the painting and then hung it up again. This kind of paint is quite special. It will go through 2 changes, first appearing and second fading." "Well," Luaccio smiled and said, "it was still normal when it was hung up, but after being illuminated by a special light, the color appeared, and the painting became the same color as the bottom frame. It looked as if the real painting had disappeared. After that, as long as you report the case and wait for the police to ask, you can take down the painting with only the frame left and nobody will know." Anna said indifferently, "What do you want to say?" "Nothing." Boss Luo walked a few steps away and came to the living room. There was an easel here. He lifted the canvas on the easel, and what was revealed was another painting, the nameless maiden. "This. You took it out of the art gallery?" "No. This is not the second, the nameless maiden, painted by Mr. Yuri in the manor. It's the first one that Miss Anna auctioned at the auction." "Impossible. It was obviously destroyed by Yuri." "Well, I picked it up later and then repaired it a little." Luaccio stretched out his hand and wiped the painting slowly. He looked at Anna's eyes. "In the process of repairing, I found something very interesting. I was talking about the paint just now. When the color on the painting slowly melted and turned into a mass of stains, it seemed to be washed by something. The nameless woman had already disappeared. There was only another woman on it with a smile. Her eyes were moving, and her smile was charming." "Yuri!" Anna's left hand overlapped her right hand, and her trembling hands gently folded on her lips, looking at its original appearance with infatuation. When a tear rolled down her cheek, she said softly in a choked voice, "Don't worry about me. Thank you for loving me." In the black and white, a little bit of color slowly spread out. It was not bright, and the range was not big, just a little bit. But it was enough to fascinate Boss Luo, who quietly appreciated it. The soul light ball slowly floated out from Anna's forehead, like a floating dandelion, and finally fell on Luaccio's palm. Its brilliance was restrained little by little. "It's higher than the standard." Miss Maid, who was waiting silently, said softly with a smile beside her master, "Congratulations, master." Luaccio seemed to be in a good mood. With a smile, he picked up the painting from the painter and looked at it carefully. "After going back, find a place to hang it up?" "Okay," Miss Maid replied softly, and then said, "It's a pity that Yuri has erased all his memories, and he hasn't had time to give it a name." "Name?" Luaccio gave a start and then chuckled. "Hasn't it been named long ago? Look, who is it painting?" So the painting was named. Chapter 303. Police Station. Yelgo was taking a nap. Of course, it was not because he had no work at hand and was too idle. He stayed up late last night to write a report. He didn't have time to go home to wash and change clothes, so he went to work wearing yesterday's clothes. Suddenly, the door of the office was opened. Yelgo was shocked and quickly stood up straight. "Mr. Victor!" "I'm not slacking off." "I'm not Mr. Victor." Yelgo was stunned. He turned around and saw a policewoman in civilian work. He suddenly opened his mouth, awkwardly. The policewoman snickered. "Well, Mr. Victor is in the coffee shop downstairs. He asked you to go there. He seems to be receiving someone. Look at his serious face. Well, but his face is not very friendly. Guessed? Yelgo was stunned. Then he walked out with doubts. He quickly ran down the stairs and found the coffee shop. In the corner, Yelgo saw Victor's back. When he walked over, he saw the receptionist that the policewoman mentioned. He had a typical Oriental face, black hair, and was wearing a black coat. He was in his 30s. The man's eyes made Yelgo feel a strange pressure. At this time, Victor also turned around and said to Yelgo, "Don't stand there, sit down. Let me introduce. This is Mr. Yi Yen from Lyon, France. He has something to ask you. You just need to answer him honestly." Speaking of Lyon, France, Yelgo suddenly realized something. He looked at Victor and Yi Yen in amazement. "Mr. Victor, do you remember that Italian drug dealer was arrested in Moscow 2 years ago?" Victor smiled and said, "That was a joint operation, and that's when I got to know this guy." "Oh." Yelgo sat down cautiously. Although they were different systems, they were essentially doing the same thing. So Yelgo quickly adjusted his mentality. "What do you want to ask me, Mr. Yi?" "Then I'll get straight to the point." Yi Yen smiled. "Of course." He didn't know how to speak Russian. They could only talk in English. He was indeed Yi Yen, the Yi Yen who had rushed to Moscow from France in one night. Just because of a message from Victor, he had made such a move. "I want to know about the corpse," Yi Yen said seriously. "Mr. Yelgo, please describe the whole thing to me." "Listen, Mr. Yelgo, it's very important for me, and even more important for our headquarters. I hope you can be thorough." Yelgo subconsciously glanced at Victor. Although Interpol sounded like a very prestigious profession, they actually didn't have the authority to directly request information from other police systems. But Victor gave him a look of acquiescence. Yelgo hesitated and nodded. "Well, Mr. Yi, you can ask me." "That person, why did he become like this?" Yelgo recalled. "I remember that at that time he seemed to take out a syringe from his body and then inserted it into his neck." Yan's eyes suddenly brightened. "Are you sure? Did he really inject it?" "Yes." Yelgo nodded. "His body began to swell, I'm sure of it." Yi Yen nodded and let out a sigh of relief. He narrowed his eyes and said, "Finally, I found some clues about those guys." Yelgo. Anyway, Yelgo was confused. Yi Yen repeated the same question and the same scene more than 10 times before he finally left, seemingly satisfied with what he had asked. He said that he had other things to do. Only Yelgo and Victor were left. Yelgo couldn't help but hesitate. "Mr. Victor, well, isn't it a bit if we reveal this matter privately?" "It's not a private disclosure." Victor calmly said, "There are a lot of things involved in this matter, and I can't explain it clearly in a short time, but you'll get to know it in the future." "Ah." Victor suddenly took out a ticket from his suit. "This is the ticket to France tomorrow and your transfer letter." "Ah." "Mr. Victor, I don't quite understand. The French side has been replenishing their manpower recently. About a month ago, when I contacted Ian, he asked me if I had any good guys to recommend. Of course. I just said it casually, but I recommended you." Mr. Victor, listen." Victor said indifferently, "Don't follow me. There's no future for following me, because I don't know how to go in the future. I may not be able to go on, but I may be able to go on forever. But no matter what, it's always good for you to go out and gain experience. Of course, you can refuse. I'm not forcing you to do anything. But if you choose to stay, I'll apply to transfer you to the evidence room." That was a civilian job. It was a disguised demotion. Can I think about it? I think I need some time to digest it. Don't take too long." Yakov returned home after a busy day. He directly sat on the sofa, calling his wife's name, but there was no response. He couldn't help but look around in confusion. When he looked back, Yakov suddenly jumped up in horror. Who are you?" "Mr. Curator of the art gallery. You framed me for stealing the painting. Have you forgotten who I am?" Black leather coat, it should be a woman, but wearing a black clown mask, he couldn't see her face. Yakov frowned. Are you a Real F&C?" He was vigilant while quietly retreating. If I were you, the best choice now is not to move. Otherwise, I don't know what's in the room now. Oh, I'm talking about what will happen to your wife and your children. What do you want to do? Yakov was stunned and said in shock and anger, "Where is the nameless maiden?" The nameless maiden? Hasn't it been sent back to the art gallery? Yakov said in cold sweat. After reopening today, I also went to have a look. Under the clown mask, Vera sneered. But I used some special equipment to scan it. You know, your kind of paint, if you use light, there will be some changes. It took me 2 whole days to test the intensity of the light. I don't know what you're talking about. Yakov turned his head. Really? Vera continued to sneer. Do you want me to go to the art gallery to take a picture of the nameless maiden? I think something interesting is going to happen. Oh, yes. I also found some interesting things in your house, like the documents about the use of funds for the art gallery's repair. Yakov took a deep breath. Let's talk about it. You just want the real painting, but I can tell you it's not in my hands. It's Efim who blackmailed me. I had to do this. After the painting was made, I gave it to him directly. So, I don't know where the painting is now. Although I also suspect that the one in the art gallery may be fake, I can only pretend that I don't know. Vera suddenly walked to Yakov and said with a harsh voice modified by a voice changer, Mr. Curator, I don't have a good reputation, so I can't imagine what I will do. I really don't know. Really? Your so-called real painting. But why is it that, after I got it, it's just a made-in-China painting? I don't know what you're talking about. Vera didn't want to continue talking. Directly pressing him on the table, taking out a small knife and nailing it on the table, next to the curator's face. I'll talk. Don't kill me. I'll talk. Yakov was shocked at this time, and quickly said, the painting is still with me. I know Efim is a guy who doesn't know anything about art, and he wouldn't think that I dared to switch the painting before giving it to him. I'm just trying my best. I really owe too much gambling debt, so I can only try my best. This family is supported by my income. I'm not interested in your family affairs. Where is the painting? The study. Behind the bookshelf in the study. Vera caught him into the study and asked Yakov to open the bookshelf. Sure enough, there was a painting wrapped in oil paper. After Vera's threat, Yakov could only tear the oil paper and take out the thing inside. But when the painting was unfolded, Yakov showed a strange expression. How could this be? How could this be? He smashed the picture frame in front of Vera. Vera was surprised by this guy's action. Was he going to destroy the evidence? But he was willing to do this to the nameless maiden. But soon, Vera finally knew why Yakov showed such a desperate expression. On the back of the so-called the nameless maiden, he switched back. There was also made in China. How could this be? Where is my painting? Where is my painting? Where is my painting? Who stole my painting? Yakov frantically rummaged through the cupboards and chests in the study like a madman. Vera looked for a while. Judging from this guy's appearance, it seemed that he was also fooled. Then where was the real painting? I have no clue at all. Miss Vera helplessly left through the window and just saw Yakov's wife and children driving back. She sneered subconsciously. You don't even know that your family is at the party today, and you still have the nerve to say that it's for your family. Alas! At this time, Vera's phone rang. Boss Vera, I've found out the identity of the wolf you saved in the manor. He's called Yelgo, a little detective in Moscow. But I found that he seems to have bought a ticket to France tomorrow. France? Vera was stunned, and then suddenly smiled. Vicar, thank you for your hard work during this time. Let's go to France for a vacation. Are you sure it's for a vacation? I heard that the male models in France are very good. Is the flight at 3:00 in the afternoon okay? There was a knock on the door. It was in front of the office of the deputy chief editor of the most gossipy magazine in the city. Hearing the knock, Ren Xiling quickly raised her head from the pillow and wiped her saliva. When she saw Lizzie coming in, she rolled her eyes. "It's you. I thought it was the old dirty chief editor." Lizzie came in with difficulty. Why was it difficult? It was like a mass grave, and it was full of the smell of all kinds of instant noodles. Looking at the messy desk, Lizzie couldn't help but sigh. "Sister Rin, why do I feel that your life has fallen into hell when Luo Qiu is not here these few weeks? You work overtime every day and sleep here instead of going home?" Ren Xiling yawned. "There are 5 days' worth of clothes in my home that haven't been washed. Do you want to help me wash them?" "No need." Lizzie quickly pinched her nose and waved her hand. Ren Xiling gave Lizzie the third finger and then stretched herself. "What's the matter? Say it." "Nothing, go. I'll go back to sleep. Tell me in advance when the boss comes." "Sister Rin, you have a parcel." "Parcel?" "Yes." Lizzie nodded. "It seems to be a painting?" "It's an International Express delivery from Moscow. It should be a letter from Luoqiu. F***CK. Why does he send me a painting? I can't eat it. Then, I'll throw it away?" "I'll throw you away first." Ren Xiling opened the parcel and found that it was an oil painting. Sub-editor Rin, who was drinking coffee to refresh herself, twisted her neck. She felt uncomfortable because she didn't sleep at home these days. She was energetic every day after sleeping at home. Sure enough, the bed at home was the best way to replenish her vitality. Ren Xiling looked at the oil painting for a while, but couldn't figure out anything. After wrinkling her nose, she put the oil painting under the wall of the office. The Nameless Maiden. What a strange name. But thinking about it, it was probably just like that. But when she looked at her office, which was like a garbage hill, she felt that even if there was an oil painting here, it wouldn't improve much. Chapter 304. Morse? Yuri? Tipika didn't like to be called by the name Yuri. Generally, he would ask others to call him Mr. Morse. Especially after these days, he felt that he had a weird dream. In the dream, he was wronged and inexplicably stayed in the detention room of the police station. But the reality was that he had been secretly planning with a guy named Brubov to deal with FM. In fact, the plan was finally completed. "Brubov, congratulations! You will soon become the new Duma. The lower house needs an excellent person like you." It was not in Tipika's manner, but in a private room of a restaurant in the city. "Thank you for your hard work, Mr. Morse." Brubov was calmer than Morse had imagined. In this banquet, he could even be described as reticent. Moreover, Brubov didn't drink, which seemed to be very rare for a Russian man. Brubov looked at Morse at this time, saying indifferently, "The appointment should come in the next 2 months. At that time, I will put forward the shipping modification plan in the Parliament and strive for more preferential treatment for your company." "Ha ha ha. Brubov, I like your pragmatic character." Morse narrowed his eyes and said happily, "But work is work. You still need to relax when it's time to relax. I've arranged some good girls for Mr. Brubov in the evening. If there's nothing else, I'll go back to the company first." Unexpectedly, Brubov suddenly stood up, looking at Morse, and said, "Just keep in touch." Morse's face didn't change, showing a rather regretful expression. "In that case, I'm looking forward to having dinner with Mr. Brubov next time." Brubov just nodded, and then tidied up his clothes as tidy as when he came, and then left with the bodyguards. "Tut, this Brubov reminds me of the Germanic people." Morse took a sip of red wine, instead of an authentic Russian. "Sir, Brubov is of authentic Russian origin. This should be right." The old butler reminded in time. Morse shrugged and said, "I mean the feeling. I hate this kind of inflexible guy." Morse suddenly thought of something and said in a low voice, "Go and arrange a few people to work in Brubov's company. I don't like what Brubov says. I take it for granted." "Understood. Boss, Are you really going to keep working with the Typica family? In the car, the secretary, who was sitting upright, suddenly asked. Brubov, who was resting with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes. He looked out of the window and suddenly asked, "Where is this?" The secretary had no choice but to say, "We're almost at Tverskaya Street." "Stop, I want to get out and walk," said Brubov softly. The secretary had no choice but to ask the chauffeur in front to find a place to park on the street. After getting off the car, Brubov suddenly said, "Just wait for me here. I want to walk alone." "Boss, it's too dangerous." The secretary frowned and said. Tverskaya Street was filled with a large number of shops, restaurants, and hotels. It was a place where tourists and locals liked to spend money. There was too much turnover, so naturally there would be a lot of pickpockets. As a secretary, he was not worried about his boss's safety. "Have you forgotten what I did before?" Brubov patted the secretary's shoulder and said indifferently, "Just wait for me here." The secretary had no choice. Of course, he knew what his boss did before he entered the business world. He was a soldier. If the club occupied a real shop in the commercial street of Luacho City and existed in the same place with this shop in a different phase, then the club should have its own place before it came to Luacho City. A spice shop. Yes, this is the address of the club before it moved. Boss Luo carefully looked at this shop that sold spices from different parts of the world. Well, mainly from Europe. In any case, he didn't believe that the former boss, who had never stepped out of her room, would deliberately choose such a place to do business. So, it was probably chosen by Miss Servant Girl. Luacho looked at Yi curiously. Miss Servant Girl just blinked her eyes, tilting her head and asking, "Master, what's the matter?" Was she acting cute? Miss Servant Girl of the club. It was rare for her to do business here. Nothing. Luacho just buried the appearance of Miss Servant Girl in his heart and didn't want to say more. He was more willing to admire quietly and smiled. "It's rare for you to come back. Let's buy some spices." But he suddenly stopped talking. With a trace of strange movement, Luacho moved his sight. That was the feeling of the black card, and the black card reflected the mood of the holder. It wasn't too strong, but vaguely there was a feeling of wanting to meet. Yi also seemed to have sensed what Boss Luo sensed. She stopped her steps and cast an inquiring look. "Build a place for negotiation." Luacho slowly ordered. Miss Servant Girl nodded, and her deep blue pupils, like the sea, slightly brightened. Looking at Yuye's eyes, Luacho couldn't help but recall the first and only day when he came to the club as a guest. She was still so charming. Gradually, Brubov found that something was wrong. The pedestrians around seemed to be decreasing all the time. It was a bit strange. It wasn't that he walked to a place with fewer people, but that people disappeared one by one in front of him. But the street was still the same. Around them, some gray fog began to emerge from the ground. Brubov subconsciously put his hand on his chest. In the inner pocket of the suit against his chest, there was a secret that he didn't intend to tell others in his life. He subconsciously sped up his pace and finally came to a small shop that sold spices. It was this store. Every once in a while, he would subconsciously pass by the store and then stand there quietly for a while. Many times he didn't gain anything, but this time he saw something different. Everything in the shop seemed to be still, as if he had entered the narrow space of time. He didn't see the shop owner, nor did he see any more customers except a man and a woman. The man was now looking at the goods on a display cabinet with his back to him. As for the girl, Miss, long time no see. Brubov took a deep breath and looked up. He seemed to hesitate for a moment, but still stepped into the shop. "Long time no see indeed, Mr. Brubov." Miss Servant Girl greeted him with a smile. Brubov said, "Seriously, since that time, I have passed by here many times, but the club has moved away from here for a while." Yi still said with a professional smile, "But if the desire of a customer is strong enough, it is completely possible to come to our shop. Mr. Brubov, you probably just hesitate around here every time?" Brubov said with a wry smile. 20 years ago, I used up my love and got enough money. Until now, I'm still single. He shook his head. Over the years, although there are many excellent women around me, none of them can move my heart. I think my hesitation is not without reason. I see. Yi nodded and didn't speak. She quietly turned around and looked at the back of her master. Brubov took a deep breath and said seriously, "Long time no see, shop owner. But I think we haven't officially met. Mr. Brubov, right?" Chapter 305. Hearing this voice, Brubov was stunned. This voice was completely different from the club owner's voice in his memory. It seemed that this was a much younger voice. "Mr. Brubov, this is our new owner." Only Miss Maid answered Brubov's doubts in a soft voice. Brubov couldn't help but move his lips. This club seemed to have never stopped giving him surprises since the moment he first met it. At this time, Luaccio took down a bottle of citronella powder from the display shelf, looking at the label without turning around. "Mr. Brubov said that you have passed by this place many times. What's the matter?" Brubov glanced at the servant girl, who looked exactly the same as 20 years ago. She didn't look old at all. Suddenly he said, "Nothing. I just occasionally remember to chat with the former shopkeeper." "Consulting?" Luaccio asked again. "Almost." Brubov nodded. It was hard to tell whether he was being sarcastic or sincere. "Your shop gives me the best discount in terms of consultation, although I'm not the same person as the former owner." Luaccio put the bottle back to its original place and took down another bottle. However, the content of the work is not different. "Mr. Brubov, you don't have to be so formal." Brubov was silent for a while, and then suddenly said, "I want to know if you need to do something which is completely against your original intention, but is an indispensable step before you reach your goal. If it's you, will you choose to take a detour, or do you have to take this step?" Luaccio said indifferently, "Why do you need to assume it's me?" "Mr. Brubov, do you think it's valuable to assume it's me?" Brubov gave a start. He suddenly felt that he did ask a very stupid question. He made a deal with this club and got a huge amount of money, so he was always in awe of the club's mysterious means. If the club owner wanted to do something with mysterious power, he probably didn't need to worry about anything. "No." Brubov shook his head and suddenly mocked himself. "Worthless. I did ask a rather stupid question. Do you think I can change this country?" All of a sudden, Luaccio heard Brubov's question. However, Luaccio acted as if he didn't hear him. He put down the bottle in his hand and then took out the third bottle to look at the label. Brubov didn't care about it at this time, but with a trace of doubt, as if he was just talking to himself. "After I got the money, I made all kinds of investments. After so many years, I did have much more wealth than before. But 20 years have already passed." Brubov smiled bitterly. "It took me half of my life to accumulate capital, but for me, it is far from enough. I have to continue to climb up. It's a place where we still can't see the end of. Sometimes I even wonder if I can succeed, if I can accomplish what I want to accomplish." It was still Brubov's voice. He sighed. "I don't know if I can go on." He finally stopped talking, but he didn't get a response from the club's new boss for a long time. The new boss seemed to have found something suitable after selecting the third bottle of spices. He put it in a shopping basket carried by Miss Maid. Then he walked to another display case. Brubov was stunned. He felt that he was being ignored. This made him feel a little irritated. However, with the passage of time, this feeling gradually began to subside. Even this subdued fast was beyond his expectation. "Do you feel better?" Luaccio unscrewed a bottle of ginger powder, lowered his head and sniffed, suddenly asking. Brubov moved his lips. He pondered for a while, and then nodded subconsciously. Luaccio then whispered, "I've read a book before, but forgot who wrote it. It mentioned that if the consulted person doesn't want to give too many suggestions mixed with his own views, Then it's enough for the consulted person to listen. He put the ginger powder in Yu Ye's basket and suddenly said, Mr. Brubov, since you chose to use your lifelong love as the transaction fee, it shows that you really need the money. You need to use it to do something you want to do. Therefore, I thought that I should know whether to take this step or not. After all, you've made up your mind at the beginning. So, do you need to trouble yourself for this step? No. Brubov shook his head gently as if he was relieved. It's not necessary. I think I just want a listener. Thank you for listening to me. It's nothing, Luaccio said indifferently. After all, this is a kind of after-sales service. I'll come again if I have a chance. Brubov took a deep breath, and his expression suddenly became quite serious. He nodded towards Luaccio's back. After that, Brubov walked to Yu and said with a smile, Miss Yu, you're still as beautiful as before. In order to show my respect, well, I have a small villa on the lakeside of Lake Ladoga in St. Petersburg. If you don't mind, you're welcome to have a vacation there at any time. It belongs to you. Then, goodbye. Brubov seemed to feel a little more relaxed and left the shop at a leisurely pace. Brubov used to be a soldier and participated in the Chechen War. It seems that his hometown was destroyed in this war and all his family members died. Yu suddenly said, and individuals can't shake the will of a country. A soul is not enough to directly change the path of a country. Luaccio shrugged. It seems that it's difficult to make a deal with Mr. Brubov again. But Luaccio stared at Miss Maid in a daze. Suddenly, he remembered that the servant girl had once said, Well, occasionally I will come across some enthusiastic guests who give me some small gifts. So, that's why you're a rich woman, or a super rich woman, right? A small gift of a lakeside villa. Master? Miss Maid couldn't guess Boss Luo's thoughts at this moment. Luaccio smiled, patting her shopping basket. That's all I want. You can choose whatever you want. He then snapped his fingers. The moment he snapped his fingers, the surroundings returned to normal. There was still a lot of traffic outside. When paying the bill, Luaccio suddenly said, Let's go to St. Petersburg next. The lakeside villa should be good for a vacation. There's still some time left before we go back. Don't waste it. Okay, I'll arrange the route right away. Boss, you're back. Seeing Brubov coming back from the street, the secretary couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He was really worried that the boss would have some trouble. After all, the boss was the soul of the company. This company had an unimaginable future. Brubov just nodded and got on the car. After sitting down, he said directly, Go back to the company. We'll be busy for a long time. By the way, show me the list of the aides you mentioned last time. Also, regarding the modification of the shipping plan, we should start working on it. Although the appointment hasn't been officially announced, I need to make all the preparations in advance. Well, help me make an appointment with Mr. Mayor in the evening and see if he's free to have dinner. The secretary was stunned and quickly nodded. She felt that her boss was suddenly full of energy after a trip alone. He was simply planning to fill his schedule completely and use one day as 2 days. Got it, boss. At the airport, Yelgo carried a luggage bag and a big backpack, running in the crowd awkwardly. Finally, he successfully completed the boarding procedures and found his seat under the guidance of the stewardess. He finally sat down. Yelgo slightly breathed a sigh of relief with a little bit of nervousness and excitement. He knew that he would soon set foot on another more intense and exciting life. However, he had to worry about something. That was his strange illness. Since his childhood, Yelgo realized that he would mutate when he was too angry. Therefore, he tried his best not to expose it. God knew what would happen if someone saw it. A werewolf who caused social unrest? He occasionally wondered if there were any of his kind in the world, and what he should do if he really met one. One of the main reasons for becoming a policeman was that he could see a lot of information that ordinary people couldn't see through the powerful police system. But obviously, even after becoming a detective, he didn't find anything useful these years. Hopefully, he could get in touch with some more secret things in the international organization in France. For example, the strange scene that happened in the manor. But I don't know where that Interpol ye went. Yelgo said to himself, I think that Interpol ye is right next to you. Suddenly, a voice came from the seat next to him, speaking the Russian official language, which was not very fluent and even awkward. Really? Right next to me. Yelgo nodded. Right next to me. Yi, Mr. Yi. You, why are you here? Yi Yen put down the newspaper in his hand and stretched out his hand. The man in his 30s showed a charming smile. Hello, I'm Yi Yen. I can tell you in advance that I will be your partner from now on. Partner? Mr. Victor. Your friend's eyes are so scary. Vera! Vera! Are you ready? We're going to the airport. Victor's voice came from outside the room. Right away. Vera, who was wearing a handsome suit and was about to comb her hair into Leonardo's look, the younger version, in the mirror, answered casually. What she didn't notice was that the black card, which she had casually thrown out like a flying card, hit the wall and fell on the edge of the wall. Suddenly, it floated up and flew into her suitcase in an instant. She finally combed her hair, then packed her suitcase and dragged it out. Yen 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 yen. Chapter 306. Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. It was under the cliff of brown, black, and red soil, but it was not built against the mountain, but directly sunk into the mountain. But it was big enough to be clear even from a distance. The white outer wall seemed to be telling something, and the simple and almost shabby style seemed to show its position. It was the Pechiers monastery. It had been 3 days since Anatole had returned to the monastery with Sullivan. In the past 3 days, Anatole didn't see Sullivan again. He seemed to have entered the depths of the monastery, which was a place that even he, a student who graduated here, hadn't entered so far. Forbidden area, Holy Land. Such names had been spread among the students when he was still a student here. Although most of these were just guesses among the students, the old monk of the monastery didn't seem to have a formal explanation. So after so many years, there was such a legend. Only those who are favored by the Lord can enter. Anatole was an orphan and abandoned near the monastery. Later, he was picked up by an old monk. It could be said that he grew up here. At that time, it seemed to be the time when the sun appeared, so the old monk named him Anatole. That was the meaning of sunrise. Life in the monastery was very simple, so simple that it was as if they had returned to a primitive society. He grew up here, was baptized, and then officially became a monk. Finally, he got the recognition of the dean with the best performance in his class. Only 20 years had passed. He was a genius in others' eyes, but he knew that he just worked harder than others. Anatole, are you there? When the door was knocked, Anatole was praying. Basically, when there was nothing else, he would always pray. This made him feel that he could empty his mind, which also made him feel that he could really listen to the gospel of the Lord one day earlier. The dean said, "Please go to the number 13 auditorium." That forbidden area, Anatole met Mr. Sullivan. Of course, there was also the dean who personally blessed him when he graduated, and the old monk who picked him up from the wilderness and raised him. "Anatole, my boy, come here." The old friar who had adopted him now smiled and beckoned. Anatole walked up to them. He began to size up this auditorium, number 13. He found that this place seemed to be even more ancient and constantly emitted a kind of holy aura, which calmed his heart, even surpassed the effect of praying. But in fact, this 13th auditorium didn't look like an auditorium at all. To be precise, this was actually just a stone room with candlesticks hanging on the four walls. The center of the auditorium was actually a circular platform. At this time, Sullivan was at the center of the round platform, waiting for his arrival. The dean and the old friar stood on either side of Sully. When Anatoly arrived in front of the three, the old cultivator suddenly stretched out his hand and whispered, "Anatoly, my child, kneel down." Anatoly nodded. Without much hesitation, he knelt on the ground. The old cultivator continued. Close your eyes, then pray in your heart and listen. Anatoly slowly closed his eyes. At the same time, the dean and the old cultivator also slowly retreated to the edge of the round platform. They also lowered their heads and closed their eyes at the same time, because for them, even if they opened their eyes, it would be blasphemy to see what was going to happen next. On the round platform, there was suddenly a faint white light, and Sullivan also walked to the front of Anatole. His hands spread apart, and his body slowly left the ground. He was floating. In the 13th auditorium, suddenly, a strong brilliance burst out from Sullivan's body. In an instant, there seemed to be countless white feathers scattered over the auditorium. A pair of white, soft feathers of light slowly spread out behind Sully. Finally, Sully opened his eyes. It was a pale golden pupil. Almost at the same time, a golden light beam shot out from a ball in the center of the auditorium and directly shone on Anatole's body, making him seem to be bathed in a golden ocean. Warm and compassionate, Anatole was almost lost in this feeling that soaked into his soul and gradually forgot the passage of time. At this moment, he seemed to feel a wave of anger, as well as a will that he couldn't quite describe. At this moment, the warm and compassionate feeling disappeared in an instant. He seemed to be suffering from heavy shackles. Instinctively, Anatoly opened his eyes. He knew that there was something wrong with his memory. The reason why Sullivan and the dean were so serious was that they wanted to help him solve this problem. But it seemed that even if he returned to the monastery and even came to the 13th auditorium, he still didn't remember the so-called forgotten things. Mr. Sullivan. Anatoly was very calm and looked at the person in front of him with doubts. The strange scene around him had disappeared long ago. At this moment, Sullivan just closed his eyes and stood in the same place. His face was a little pale. When the dean and the old cultivator heard Anatoly's voice, they opened their eyes in surprise at the same time. Then Sullivan said something that shocked everyone. Anatoly, you are a heretic. You need to wash away the sins in your body. Dean, imprison the holy power in his body. 3 days later, I will personally purify his soul that is stained with the aura of sin. Anatoly moved his lips. Obviously, his heart, which had been calm for 20 years, began to fluctuate violently at this moment. He didn't understand. And what happened to the recovery of memory? A long time ago, there was a kind but ugly monster in the forest. On the train to St. Petersburg, a young mother was telling a story to a troublesome little girl. Later, the monster met a little girl. The little girl was not afraid of it. Instead, because of the monster's kindness, she and the monster became good friends. Every day, the monster would pick the sweetest fruit from the forest and fill it with clear spring water for the little girl to eat. However, the little girl had to promise not to tell others. The little girl in his arms was slowly drawn in by the story. The mother continued. Many days passed, and the little girl was very happy with the company of the monster. Suddenly, one day, the little girl innocently said that when she was 18 years old, she would marry the monster. The little girl later moved away with her family. She didn't have time to tell the monster about it. The monster didn't know, but it still picked the best fruit and filled it with the sweetest spring water. However, it didn't see the little girl again. The little girl in her arms showed a sad expression when she heard this. The mother patted her face comfortingly, but continued to whisper. It counted the days day by day. It carved a mark with its nails on the tree stump that it had made with the little girl. After a day, it carved a stroke. In this way, day by day. Suddenly, one day, the monster found that it was the little girl's 18th birthday. But on this day, it still didn't see the little girl. Hearing this, the little girl pouted and said, Mom, this monster is so pitiful. Will it never see that little girl again? Her mother said gently, later it saw her. This monster finally mustered his courage and walked out of the forest. It mixed in the crowd and searched all the way. Finally, it found this little girl. Of course, when the little girl was 18 years old, she had already become a very beautiful girl. Then did Mr. Monster and the little girl get married? The mother was about to speak and respond to the child's expectations. Unexpectedly, at this moment, her father, who was sitting beside her, suddenly said, "They're not married." The little girl fell in love with someone else, so in the monster's anger, it ate the little girl in one bite. Then it became a very handsome person and found another true love all of a sudden. As he spoke, her father opened his hands and approached his daughter with bared fangs and brandished claws. "After eating you, I'll become a handsome person too. Wah! Ah!" This scared the little girl out of her mother's arms. However, she soon seemed to have bumped into something and lost her balance. She was about to fall to the ground. Be careful. In fact, she didn't fall. Instead, she was steadily supported up. The little girl raised her head and tilted it. What she saw was a young big brother who looked like her parents. Black hair and black eyes were not common for little girls. "I'm sorry, sir." Seeing this, her mother quickly stood up from her seat and said apologetically, "My husband was playing with this child. I didn't expect to scare her like this. I'm really sorry to have bumped into you." As she spoke, her mother glared at her husband with a reproachful gaze. "It's okay." The young big brother smiled. He touched the little girl's head and suddenly said, "Madam, the ending your husband said is quite interesting." Ah, the little girl's father was stunned. He couldn't find how to continue the words of this young man with an Asian face. He could only smile awkwardly. "By the way, is this story original?" the young big brother suddenly asked curiously. The little girl's father quickly waved his hand and said, "Not really. Anyway, it's a story I heard from the old man when I was young. That ending was just nonsense. Don't take it seriously." "Is that so? I won't disturb you." Looking at the young big brother walking back, the little girl climbed onto her father's lap and stuck her head out from the seat. When she saw the big brother sitting 5 or 6 rows behind her, she pouted and suddenly looked down at her mother and said, "Mom, there's a very beautiful big sister there." Okay, we're about to reach the station. Sit properly. We're about to reach your grandmother's house," the mother said sternly. At the same time, she twisted her husband's ear and forced him to look back. The train finally stopped. Chapter 307. In the evening, Luaccio stood on the wooden balcony and watched the sunlight fading away by the lakeside. The villa was built above the lake with a larger area than usual. The cool water vapor began to climb up slowly when the night turned cold. Yu Yi was standing on the edge of the balcony. She was diligently fishing something from the bottom of the lake. It was beer in a basket that had sunk into the lake. An entire afternoon of immersion should be enough for the beer to have a very good taste. Although it was a lakeside, it was not a cluster of buildings. There were all kinds of villas in the rich area, but it was just a lonely one. It had nothing to do with luxury. It was just a simple 3-story building. Inside was naturally filled with modern tools. But from the outside, it looked like a building from 100 or 200 years ago. It was a bit big for 2 people to live here, but Luaccio felt that the quietness was just right. When they arrived, there was only an old man in the villa who seemed to be waiting for something. He handed over the keys without saying a word or asking any questions. In the end, he drove away in an old but well-maintained pickup truck. The food was all fresh. The original plan was to end the trip in less than a week. But Luaccio felt that it was okay to spend the time here. In this small cabin in the woods, surrounded by the woods and the lakeside, the servant girl had pried open the lid of the beer bottle. The beer rose in the glass slowly. Everything in front of them was golden. Luaccio snapped his fingers. In the living room behind him, the phonograph automatically loaded a black film disc. When the music slowly sounded, he looked at Yu Yi and said softly, "Do you want to dance? I want to see you dance." When the night fell, the lights were slightly bright, but the dancing shadows were elongated. It was even quieter here. The off-road vehicle for a road trip was driving along the road by the lake. There were 4 young people and 2 couples in the car. They were kissing passionately in the back seat, and they were chatting casually in the front seat. The two people in the front seat seemed to have just become a couple not long ago. Perhaps because the boy was too shy, his eyes would occasionally glance at what was in the back seat through the rearview mirror. Then, when the girl in the front passenger seat wasn't paying attention, he would quietly rest his eyes on her legs or chest. They came out for a vacation. The two in the back seat caught his attention. I hope I can succeed. The boy secretly encouraged himself. Suddenly, the girl in the front seat said, "Did we go to the wrong place?" The boy in the car really cared about his new girlfriend. He didn't have a girlfriend before. This was the first time in his life, so he cared about every word of his girlfriend. The car came to a stop at once. The deserted road gave him the freedom to stop whenever he wanted. He quickly opened the GPS map on his phone and raised his head. It seems we really went to the wrong place. Should we go back? The girl in the back seat muttered, "I'm hungry." This place seems to be okay. Isn't there a small forest nearby? The other boy in the back seat didn't care. In our life, we occasionally need to have some unexpected things. The girl in the front seat sighed, "I hope we won't spend the night in this car. And are you sure you have the ability to find food in this place?" The boy in the back seat said casually, "I'm good at catching fish." The girl in the front seat just rolled her eyes. At this time, the girl in the back seat stuck her head out and suddenly turned back. "There seems to be a house over there. I saw the light. Maybe we don't need to sleep in the car." The boy in the driver's seat quickly put down the brake, saying quickly, "I'll drive over there and have a look." "Excuse me, is anyone here?" The off-road vehicle stopped in front of the hut beside the lake. The boy in the car, Len, shouted loudly after getting off the car. But after a while, there seemed to be no response. He couldn't help but shout politely, "Excuse me, is anyone here?" The one behind Len was Branham, who was relatively careless. At this time, Branham patted Len's shoulder with both hands. "Buddy, you should shout like me." He even whispered, "I think Allie would prefer to see your capable and straightforward side." So, Branham directly walked up the wooden stairs in front of the hut and knocked on the door with great force in a hurry. Bang, 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 bang. Finally, Branham's palm hit nothing. He took a step back and saw the door slowly open. At this moment, Branham subconsciously stared at it and made a clear and weak whistle. It was a very beautiful woman who opened the door. Her deep blue pupils were as charming as sapphires. "Excuse me, is there anything I can help you with?" The woman smiled and said softly. Branham suddenly felt that he couldn't find out what to say next. He thought he might be immersed in this almost suffocating beauty. But he seemed to remember that he had a girlfriend and reacted quickly. "We went the wrong way. There are no other buildings around. Can we stay here for a while? It's better if we have food." Saying this, he quickly took out his wallet from his pocket. "Of course, we'll pay." "Please wait a moment." The woman nodded slightly and walked into the hut, but closed the door. Branham looked at this scene in astonishment. He had to turn around to look at his companion, and then shrugged. Allie raised her head and looked at the hut. The old architectural style, the surrounding woods, and the lakeside seemed to bring her back to the era of 100 years ago. She suddenly felt the coolness of the night, holding her hands and rubbing them lightly. She glanced at Len, who was looking down at the map on his mobile phone. She thought with distress, maybe it would be better if this guy could be more active. Branham's girlfriend suddenly walked to Allie, patting her back, and suddenly said, "Isn't Len good? An honest man." "Gloria, sometimes when I'm too honest, I feel a little." Allie stopped. She seemed to have difficulty finding the words to describe what she was going to say next. She couldn't help but sigh and put down her hands. "Forget it, you won't understand." Gloria was about to say something, but suddenly the door was opened again. The unbelievably beautiful woman appeared in front of the four people again. Her smile was like a solidified sculpture, as if it didn't change at all. She said, "You can come in. Our master said if you need, you can stay here for one night." I'm Branham, this is Len, Ali, this is Gloria. Luocio, this is Yi, she works in my house. But Branham clearly remembered that this woman called Yi just said the word master. After entering the hut, he found that it was far more complicated than it looked from the outside. The renovation of this place must have cost a lot of money. Furthermore, it was beside a lake. It should be very difficult to get a piece of land here. This young man looked like a typical Asian. His Russian was so good that he couldn't distinguish which country he came from. But no matter which country he came from, at least he was a very rich person. Sorry to bother you, Mr. Luocio, Len said cautiously. Luocio was not a very hospitable person, but now, because of the need of work, he was more willing to communicate with outsiders. Two couples, taking advantage of the weekend holiday, drove to the suburbs for a vacation. It sounded like a very good way of life, right? Young people were always talkative. At the dinner table, Luocio was listening to the passionate conversation between the two couples. They started from a few words to a lively one. China. Branham finally found out which country the owner of the hut came from, and couldn't help sighing. I feel that this is a country full of mystery. I like this mysterious place. Luocio cut off a piece of potato and put it into his mouth, chewing it for a while, then said softly, Branham seems to like mysterious things very much. I'm bold. Branham smiled and put his hands on the table. I like thrilling things and scary things. For example, he suddenly paused and looked around. He seemed to become cautious all of a sudden. He lowered his voice and said, For example, look at how quiet this place is. We're strangers who just met each other. If suddenly there's a knock on the door, wouldn't that be great? His girlfriend, Gloria, subconsciously touched the goosebumps on her arms and said reproachfully, Shut up! Don't you know how to look at the atmosphere? Branham shrugged. I just said, for example. Besides, how could someone knock at this time? At this time, cluck, cluck, cluck. Someone knocked on the door. Chapter 308. Along the way, they didn't see any other light sources except for the lakeside cottage. In such a remote place, what was the probability of encountering two groups of people going the wrong way in less than half an hour? They almost subconsciously looked towards the owner of the cottage. They found that the young Oriental man who called himself Luocio also showed a curious look on his face. That was to say, for this Luocio, he was also surprised by the sudden knock on the door. Branham, Len, and the others couldn't help but look at each other. This was completely a subconscious behavior, but they seemed to see a little bit of tension in their companion's eyes. I'll go and have a look. Yi said softly. Luocio nodded. Watching you leave, he took a glass of water and drank. It seems to be very lively tonight. Except that this man came from China. There seemed to be no more information. At the same time, it seemed to have piqued the curiosity of the young people, especially since there were only two of them, one master and one servant, and they looked so weak, yet they lived in such a remote place. Gloria couldn't help but ask curiously, Luocio, you live here, aren't you afraid? Oh my God, it's too quiet here. Maybe there will be beasts. It's okay. The scenery is good during the day. Luocio replied. Len didn't want to become a person who could only listen in this conversation, so he quickly said, Mr. Luocio, what do you do for a living? It's not easy to own such a small lakeside cottage. Len couldn't help but receive the gaze of his three companions, including Allie, who just became his girlfriend. He couldn't help regretting. It seemed impolite to suddenly ask an unfamiliar person about his work. Oh, sorry, I asked too much. Len quickly waved his hand. It's okay. Luocio smiled and drank a mouthful of water. Me, I'm just doing a small business. I sell some small things to others. Is Miss Yi not back yet? Could something have happened? Ellie suddenly looked towards the door. I don't think so, Luocio said softly. Let's eat, the food is getting cold. At this time, Miss Maid came back alone. She lowered her head and whispered something to Luocio. Boss Luo nodded with a smile. Then Miss Maid turned around and left. When she opened the door, she saw a man wearing a black top hat. He was very clean, had a very gentle face, and his body was very slender. He looked like a male model on the runway. The man looked like he was in his 20s, less than 30 years old. Polite and courteous. That's right, he was also carrying a rather old-looking leather case. The case was so big that it completely covered his back. When he saw Miss Maid open the door, he suddenly took off his hat and put it on his chest. Then he nodded slightly. I didn't expect to meet such a beautiful lady here. Thank you. I smelled the aroma of food from far away. The man smiled. Forgive me for being too hungry, so I was attracted to this place. I don't think there's any place nearby. Seeing the beautiful lady's smile growing, the man also smiled elegantly. Of course, I'll pay for it. Please wait for a moment. The man took off the box on his back and placed it in the corner. Then he turned around and looked at the table full of people and dishes. He suddenly took a light breath and revealed an intoxicated expression. What a fragrant smell! This man was so handsome that even Allie and Gloria seemed to be dazed by him. At this time, Branham suddenly pushed Len, who didn't react and was stunned. Then Branham pushed his body quietly. Len then realized and patted the stool beside him. Branham said exaggeratedly, "Sit here if you don't mind." Of course, we're not the owner here. Like you, we're just passing by and are helped by the owner here. Like an angel, the handsome man said with a smile. What? Branham gave a start. The man still smiled, isn't it? In this remote place, there's a place that can provide food and a comfortable environment for people who are lost. The owner here really has an angel's heart. Saying this, the man raised the glass of beer from the table. He also stretched out his other arm, opened it, and then folded it in front of his chest. He bent his waist. Why don't you salute our kind owner? Boss Luo slightly opened his mouth. It was indeed a bit exaggerated. Luaccio gently shook his head. Ha ha ha, you guy. Branham was amused by the man's appearance. Sir, did you come here from the Tsar's era? He followed the man's example and picked up the glass. He raised his hand and folded it in front of his chest. He bent over slightly and drank all the beer in the glass in one gulp. He wiped his mouth and said, "This reminds me of the role of the minister who met the king in a play when I was in junior high." Len always felt that Branham was looking for trouble. At this time, he had to touch his best friend with his elbow and smiled awkwardly. He may have drunk too much. The handsome man shook his head and chuckled. It doesn't matter. As this gentleman said, maybe I'm really a person who lived in the Tsar's era. Then you have to tell us what was in the Tsar's era. Gloria asked with great interest. The handsome man closed his eyes and slowly said with a magnetic voice, there were sports cars that could run on the road. Oh, I'm talking about carriages. There were also huts by the lake like here. Oh, yes, of course. There were also our passionate and beautiful Russian girls, such as if he was dancing like a dancer, he almost spun himself around to face Gloria. He gently lifted her hand and kissed the back of her hand. Like you, my lady. Even Boss Luo, who was watching the show, couldn't help but glance at Branham, who didn't look good. Well, he felt that there was a bit of vivid light flashing on his head. Green light. Branham was obviously a young man who couldn't bear this kind of behavior. At this time, his eyes changed. He became expressionless and said indifferently, "Are there people like me? I think I may be a warrior." The handsome man stood up and nodded in greeting. "I think so." "Oh, yes, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Eric's. I think I should sit down and enjoy this unexpected dinner." He whispered to the real owner here, the young man with an oriental face. "May I?" "Sit down." Luaccio nodded. After Eric sat down, he picked up a plate of stewed potatoes and put it in front of his nose. After smelling it, he said with a smile, "This may be the most delicious thing I've eaten recently. I'm so grateful." Eric was about to start eating, but at this moment there was another knock on the door. And this time the knocking seemed to be incomparably urgent. as the knocking did not stop. "Is anyone there? Please help me. Is anyone there? Please help me." It was a woman's voice. It seemed to be crying, and it was very loud. Even if they sat here, they could still hear it clearly. Chapter 309. The little girl held her mother's arm in fear, and her mother also held the little girl's hand more tightly. Luaccio had met the mother and daughter on the train to St. Petersburg. They were a family with a story, but now the master of the family was missing. It was late at night, and the wind was strong outside. It was even colder near the lake, but the light in the house and the soft sofa seemed to give the mother some warmth. She was surprised to meet the young man on the train in this place, but the disappearance of her husband completely covered this subtle surprise. "We were going to go through this mountain road to my husband's hometown. He wanted to get off the train to relieve himself, so he asked us to stay in the car, but he didn't come back after half an hour. I had to get off the train to find him, but—" The girl's mother painfully covered her face, sobbing, "I only found his phone on the ground." "Did you call the police?" Ryan, one of the young men, was the first to speak after listening to the story. The girl's mother shook her head, taking out her phone. "I don't know why, but it keeps showing that the server is out of service. I have to ask for help." The young people looked at each other. Allie took out her phone, saying in shock, "I can't get the signal either." "Me too." Gloria also looked down at her phone. "Me too." "Me too." Seeing Ryan and the other three looking at him at the same time, Luocchio threw out his phone and shook his head. "I think mine is the same." "Isn't this place in the server?" Ryan was stunned. "But before I came in, I could still use the internet." "When did that happen? Now it's not the time to think about the signal, but how to help this lady." Allie suddenly bit her thumb. "By the way, Mr. Luocchio, do you have any other communication tools? I mean a wired phone." "Sorry, no." Luocchio suddenly stood up. "It looks like we can only wait for the communication to be restored naturally or wait until dawn. If the communication still can't be restored, we can go out and ask the police for help. Of course, it would be best if this missing gentleman didn't meet with any accident and was able to find this place by himself. We have so many people. Can we go out and help to look for—" Len suddenly raised his hand and said enthusiastically, but when he saw Branham's eyes, he lowered his voice, "I'm just suggesting." For the girl's mother, perhaps any kind of help was what she desperately needed. At this moment, she was even looking at the crowd with a pleading gaze. At this time, Gloria subconsciously looked at the night outside the living room and reached out to touch her arm. She hesitated and said, "Are there really no more places to live nearby?" The girl's mother's eyes immediately dimmed. Thinking about it, it was possible that they would encounter danger, let alone in a situation where someone was missing. She knew she couldn't force anything. "Mrs. Maggie, do you still remember where your husband went missing?" Suddenly, a voice came from the dining table behind them. "Alex." "I remember." Alex wiped his lips with the napkin on the table, then stood up and smiled. "If you don't mind, I can accompany you back to the original place to look for him." I can also help." Len took a deep breath at this time, slowly raising his hand and saying, as if he had plucked up his courage. Vaguely, Allie's eyes seemed to brighten up. Hearing Len's words, Branham frowned and suddenly stood up. "Well, I'll go with you. It's better to have one more person than one less. But Gloria and Allie will stay here for the time being, right?" It seemed to be decided in this way. The girl's mother, namely Mrs. Maggie, Alex, Branham, and Len, went back to the place where her husband went missing again. Although Mrs. Maggie was a little worried, she still chose to leave her daughter in the cottage. Perhaps it was because she had met this young man once on the train, or she felt that for the little girl. Now she needed a safe place more. When Mrs. Maggie made this decision, it seemed that she had made a great decision. "Well, I hope that the goddess of luck can bring us good luck on this trip." In front of the door, Alex smiled and said goodbye, then finally got into the car that Mrs. Maggie drove back. The little girl was caught by Allie's palm. She looked at her mother's car reluctantly until it was out of sight. Then she suddenly threw herself into her elder sister's arms. After Allie comforted her, she took the little girl into the house. Gloria was now walking back and forth in the living room, seeming to be worried. Allie didn't know what to say for a while. She subconsciously looked at the young owner of the cottage, finding that he was now reading an old book which was taken down from the bookshelf on the wall of the living room. It seemed that he was not worried at all. This person was really calm. Allie thought quietly. After an unknown period of time, the servant girl walked into the living room with a tea tray in her hands. She squatted down and took out the cup inside. She said softly, "Drink some flower tea. This is Luotian flower tea. It can calm your mood and help you recover your spirit." You put the cups in front of them one by one. Allie said thank you. Gloria had never stopped pacing back and forth since the beginning. At this time, even if she took the cup, she just held it in her hand, drinking while walking back and forth. It seemed that she was thinking about something and was absorbed in it. "Tell me, what's your name?" Miss Maid came to the little girl at last. "Lena. Lena, good girl." Miss Maid touched the little girl's hair. "Are you afraid?" Lena nodded, suddenly asking, "Elder sister, will my father be okay?" "I don't know," Yi said softly, "but if he is okay, he will naturally be okay. If something happens, no matter how worried you are, something will still happen. Do you like to have something happen or not?" The little girl was stunned, tilting her head. She couldn't understand the words of this beautiful elder sister. The little girl, Lena, lowered her head and drank the tea, then looked around curiously. This elder sister is so strange. Lena suddenly whispered in Yuye's ear. She was pointing at Gloria. "Is there anything strange?" Yuyi asked curiously. Lena suddenly said, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. "Did you see?" This elder sister turned around after 3 steps, then turned around again after 3 steps. "She has been like this since just now." "Really?" Miss Maid smiled slightly. She stood up, finally touching Lena's head, then walked to Luocio and sat down. She just sat there quietly, without any sound and other unnecessary movements. Allie looked at her curiously. She felt like she was looking at a puppet. Tick-tock, tick-tock, that was the sound of the pendulum clock in the living room. As if it was beating with the heartbeat, every movement could be transmitted to people's hearts. Gloria sat down. Perhaps she was tired from walking. She looked down at her phone and then at Ellie. She seemed to be trying to find a topic to talk about. She opened her mouth several times, but in the end she didn't say a word. The little girl, Lena, looked back and forth in the living room. It was already time for her to go to bed. Now it seemed that after experiencing something, her normal schedule was disrupted. Lena, who was wearing a small floral skirt, white stockings and red leather shoes, walked down from the sofa gently. She saw a large leather suitcase placed in the corner of the living room and the dining room. Lena walked towards the suitcase, subconsciously. It was getting closer and closer. She stretched out her hand, wanting to touch the suitcase. It was getting closer. Pa! Suddenly Lena heard such a sound. She was startled and even turned around. She only heard that the elder brother who was sitting and reading suddenly closed a book in his hand. That was why the sound was made. The elder brother whispered to her, "Touching other people's things is not what a good child should do." Lena stuck out her tongue and quickly put her hands behind her back. Luocio smiled. He grabbed a candy from the snack box on the tea table. "Do you want to eat it?" Lena nodded, walking quickly towards Boss Luo. Chapter 310. Milk and strawberry candy seemed to suit Lena's taste. "Delta, big brother, can you tell me a story?" Lena suddenly asked. "Story?" The little girl nodded. "Every night at this time, my mother would tell me a story to coax me to sleep." Luocio suddenly remembered that the little monsters he met in Yang Taizi's Taoist hall seemed to have been asked to tell stories like this. He subconsciously had a strange thought. Is it because I'm the kind of naughty kid who would tell stories to me? "What story do you want to hear?" Lena thought for a while. Big brother, do you know the ending of the story? It's the story my mother told me on the train in the daytime. Lucio said, Didn't your father tell you the ending of the story? Lena doesn't believe in my father's ending. The little girl raised her head and pouted. I want to hear the real ending. Then what do you think the real ending should be? Lucio suddenly asked back. The little girl lowered her head and thought for a while. Well, Mr. Monster is so pitiful. He should marry a little girl and live happily ever after. What monster? Allie suddenly interrupted, perhaps because she was too quiet. She needed something to talk about and say something. It's said that he's a very kind but ugly monster. Lucio looked at Allie, slowly telling the first part of the story he heard from Mrs. Maggie in the morning. Oh, that's the story. Allie showed a look of understanding. She saw the little girl's gaze, so she smiled. I also heard this story when I was a child. Well, it's actually a popular story in the nearby area. Lena suddenly turned from Boss Luo to Allie. Allie touched her head. But at the end of the story, Mr. Monster and the little girl didn't get married, but lived happily together. Ah, why? Lena was disappointed. Did Mr. Monster really eat his bride? Wait. Why did the story suddenly jump to the bride stage? Luo Chio looked at this little girl in surprise. How far have you gone with your imagination? No, Allie said seriously. On the contrary, the little girl ate Mr. Monster's heart. Why did she eat Mr. Monster's heart? The little girl, Lena, showed a sad expression. Allie said calmly, later in the story, the little girl grew up and left Mr. Monster. She went to the outside world, met a lot of people, and learned a lot of things. Then, she fell in love with the son of a noble. However, when the little girl grew up, she was actually not beautiful, and the son of the noble did not like her. Later, she met a wizard. The wizard told her that as long as she ate Mr. Monster's heart, she could immediately become very beautiful and make everyone fall in love with her. Allie sighed and said, Mr. Monster was very sad when he found out, but it still dug out its heart. It was because it liked this little girl very much. Even though the little girl had grown up and no longer liked it, it was still willing to let her be happy. So, Mr. Monster dug out his heart and gave it to her. Then he left alone. Then, did she really marry a noble son in the end? No. Allie shook her head and said, after eating Mr. Monster's heart, she did not become more beautiful. Instead, she became as ugly as Mr. Monster. The noble's son disliked her even more. Even her parents despised her. In the end, she could only go back to the forest and live there, not daring to see people. But this time, Mr. Monster was no longer with her. Lena said sadly, Mr. Monster, is he dead? I don't know. The story ends here. But later on, there was a legend that after Mr. Monster dug out his own heart and took it out, he wandered outside alone. Allie said slowly, people said that without a heart the monster had no memories. It was only a shell like a walking dead, but it wanted to find its heart. Thus, it went around attacking innocent little girls, wanting to find the heart that it had lost. But it ate a lot of little girls, but in the end, it still could not find it. In the end, Mr. Monster came to the side of a lake and jumped into the lake. Since then, he has never appeared again. Mr. Monster is so pitiful, Lena said sadly. Allie could only reach out and touch Lena's face, comforting her in a soft voice. Is this a local legend? Lucio asked suddenly. Allie nodded and smiled bitterly. I don't know what kind of mentality the person who made up this story had. Anyway, when I grew up, I always felt that this story should not be told to children. But you still told the whole story, didn't you? Boss Luo shook his head and looked out of the window, whispering, That lake! It's here, Ladiga Lake. The three of them opened the windows respectively, shining the strong flashlight on the trees on both sides of the road, and kept shouting the name of Maggie's husband. But it seemed that they got nothing along the way. Logically speaking, since this place is so remote, it should be at least 20 to 30 kilometers away before there are people. Could it be that they encountered a large beast or something? Branham suddenly put forward his hypothesis. Len couldn't help bumping this guy. Mrs. Maggie, don't worry, this is not a dangerous area where brown bears come out. Even if there are beasts, I think there are more squirrels. Len hurried to comfort her. It's here. Our car was parked here just now. Maggie stopped the car at this time. Then let's get off the car and look around carefully to see if we can find anything. Eric suggested. Mrs. Maggie nodded and then pointed to a direction. My husband's mobile phone was found in front of us. Then they walked towards this direction and walked into the forest. Their shoes stepped on the dry branches and leaves, which sounded unusually loud. I suddenly feel something. Walking behind them, Branham lowered his voice and whispered to Len, Later we will meet Mrs. Maggie's husband's dead body. Len gave a start and hurriedly said, Don't talk nonsense. Branham smiled. Don't you feel it's very exciting? When we found the dead body, he suddenly shouted, Wow, and stood up. Then he chased after you and kept chasing after you. What's wrong? I'm just saying, why are you so scared? You're so timid. Why did you sleep with Ellie? Branham, are we lost? Len swallowed his saliva and shone the flashlight in front. Chapter 3:11. Mrs. Maggie. Eric's. Mrs. Maggie. Len tried to call Mrs. Maggie and Eric's loudly. However, after a long time, other than the mist rising from the forest under the flashlight, he did not see anything that moved. What should we do? Branham. He couldn't help but look at his companion in panic, and even grasped his companion's arm at a loss. Calm down, don't scare yourself. Branham took a deep breath and said, We should think about where we lost them. No, we should go to the parking place. They may find that we are missing, so they are waiting for us. Len could only nod. They started at once for the head. At this time, Len seemed to step on a pit by accident and suddenly screamed in pain. Perhaps because he was too nervous, Branham scolded with a little dissatisfaction, Be careful! You idiot! Help me! Len stretched out his hand in the small pit. Branham stretched out his hand, but when he shone the flashlight, he couldn't help being stunned. His body trembled subconsciously. Len, what are you pressing on? Don't scare me. Len was stunned. He instinctively put his hand under his body. It was warm and soft, but he didn't know the feeling of soil. Len's eyes became extremely panicked. It's Mom, Mrs. Maggie. Ryan crawled to his feet and screamed in horror. Branham subconsciously moved the flashlight in his hand. When the light moved to Mrs. Maggie's head, Mrs. Maggie was also looking at him. Is she breathing? Branham swallowed his saliva subconsciously. Len, who was calm, obviously couldn't keep calm. His trembling fingers slowly reached to Mrs. Maggie's nostrils. No. Ye covered the little girl Lena with a thin blanket. It was midnight. The time for the little girl Lena to sleep had passed. She might have missed her usual routine because she was worried, but her body was obviously protesting if she missed too much time. So she was so sleepy that she fell asleep on the sofa. I'm going to clean up the tableware. Seeing that there was nothing more to do, the servant girl walked to Luaccio and said, There are not many plates, so I don't plan to leave them until tomorrow. Luaccio nodded. After you, he cleaned up the tableware and went into the kitchen. Luaccio suddenly looked at the pendulum clock on the wall and then at Ailey. She sat on one end of the sofa and rested her chin on her hand, but she was dozing off. There was no internet connection, and in this silent environment it was easy to get sleepy, especially when there was still the worry of waiting. Probably. Ellie's head suddenly slid down from her palm as if she had just woken up. She began to look around, but all she could see was Gloria, who was lying on the other side of the sofa. Gloria seemed to be completely asleep. She couldn't help but ask, Is he not here yet? Them. Luaccio shook his head. If Miss Ailey is sleepy, you can rest in your room. There were actually quite a lot of houses here. Maybe it's better for you to take a bath. Hearing the sound of washing from the kitchen, Allie didn't ask where Yu Yi was. She shook her head and said, "Let's talk about it later. Let Len and Branham haven't come yet." "Okay." Luaccio suddenly stood up and walked to little Lena's side. The little girl turned her body in her sleep, and the blanket almost slid down. Boss Luo covered the blanket again and suddenly asked, "Is Len Branham a good friend of Miss Ailie?" Allie scratched her head, yawned, and took a deep breath. Then she pulled herself together and said, "Ryan is my boyfriend. We just started dating not long ago. Branham and Gloria have been together for a long time." Seeing Allie looking at the other end of the sofa, Boss Luo also looked over and nodded. "Miss Ailie and Miss Gloria have known each other for a long time?" "We were classmates in high school. Then we went to the same university." Allie smiled slightly. "She's always a lively person. I'm very happy to meet her." "Miss Ailie is also good." Boss Luo praised her politely. Ai Lee's eyes suddenly darkened. Her mouth curved into a smile, but she didn't say anything. She didn't seem to want to continue this topic, so she asked, "By the way, Luaccio, why did you build such a villa in such a place?" There was no one around, but looking at the decorations in the small villa, it was obviously worth a lot. "A guest gave it to me." Luaccio then said, "I have nothing to do these days, so I decided to stay here for a while. And for me, this quietness is just right." He sat down again and said indifferently, "Sometimes work is tiring, so it's a good way to recharge 1 or 2 days of leisure." "Then we're disturbing you." Allie smiled. "Don't worry about it." Luaccio shook his head. "I'm the kind of person who likes to stir up trouble. There will always be some strange things happening to me. For example, Mr. Monster in the story, just now. If he suddenly emerged from the lake, I won't be too surprised." Ailie suddenly rubbed her arms as if she had goosebumps. She subconsciously looked at the dark lake on the terrace through the window of the living room. "Hearing you say that, I feel the same way. You sound like you're telling the truth." Luaccio looked at Allie like this. Allie also looked at Boss Luo like this. They suddenly looked at each other and smiled, and the atmosphere seemed to become more lively all of a sudden. Feeling that the topic seemed to be open, Allie looked around the living room again. "But your guest is really generous. Although it's quiet here, but this villa is really good. I'm a little curious, what kind of business do you do, and why the guest is willing to give you such a gift?" "What kind of business?" Luaccio thought for a while. "Probably selling some things to the guest. You know, when people ask for something, if they really want to get it, they will be very generous." Allie gave a start. Selling some things to the guest was too general. It was almost like nothing was said. She frowned and said, "What do you need?" Luaccio smiled and said softly, "Miss Allie, why don't you think about it first? What do you need?" "Me." Allie shrugged. "I think it's best if Len and others can come right now." But at this moment, she heard a loud knock on the door. She was stunned at first, and then said with surprise, "They should be here. Luaccio, you're really amazing. I just opened my mouth, and they came. I'll open the door." Luaccio also stood up. Allie quickly walked to the door and opened it. At the moment when the door was opened, Allie saw Len and Branham. The two hurried in, but their faces were unusually pale, and they looked very flustered. Len's lips even looked a little dry, and seemed to have fallen on the ground and stained with some mud. Allie was stunned at once. "What's wrong with you?" Branham was gasping at this time, and while adjusting his breath, he said quickly, "Corpse! We found the corpse. It's the corpse of Mrs. Maggie." "What?" Ellie suddenly exclaimed in surprise. She subconsciously turned around and found that the owner of the small villa had come over curiously and seemed to have heard her exclamation. "Did something happen?" Allie quickly said, Just now Branham said he found Mrs. Maggie's corpse." She had to lower her voice. Mrs. Maggie's corpse. Len looked at Allie at this time and said in a panic, "It's true. I accidentally fell into the pit, and then found Mrs. Maggie's corpse. Before that, we lost her. Didn't expect. How could this happen?" Allie said inconceivably, "But right, Isn't there another person, Arax? Branham quickly said, Don't talk about that guy. We can't see him at all. He glanced at Len, and his expression suddenly became serious. We suspect that it may be this guy. Don't talk nonsense before there is evidence. Allie suddenly interrupted. Branham said, But think about it, this Arax suddenly appeared. Don't you think it's weird? You see, his behavior is just like a psychopath. How could someone carry such a big box to this place? Think about it seriously. We didn't see this guy carry any means of transportation, but he walked here alone. Allie was shaken at once. Box? Len swallowed his saliva at this time and said hesitantly, I say, Allie Branham, do you feel the size of this box? What do you want to say? Branham asked nervously. Len swallowed his saliva again. Is the size just right? I mean, if an adult is stuffed in it, it seems it's okay. That box. Branham frowned. Ah. At this time, Allie suddenly heard a scream. It was Gloria's voice. Did Gloria wake up because she heard the commotion? But Allie didn't have the mood to care about when she woke up. She quickly walked into the living room and saw Gloria curling her body on the sofa in horror. She stretched out her trembling finger and pointed at the big leather box leaning against the corner. Blood, a lot of blood. Yes, sticky blood was gushing out of the cracks in the box at this moment. The blood flowed on the floor and soon spread out in a large area, but didn't stop. To be continued. Chapter 312. College meant more freedom. Although for high school students, the degree of freedom was already very high. However, they could leave the sight of their parents and choose to live in the academy's dormitory with some of their peers. They wouldn't have to listen to their parents nagging if they returned home late. Furthermore, they would have more time to choose to work, and they would have more economic freedom. Who wouldn't want that? I should be happier, Ailey thought. She sat on the grass next to the school playground, reading Tagore's book while thinking so, but she didn't seem to feel the so-called good half a semester had passed. Suddenly, something patted on the top of her head. Allie turned around subconsciously. She found it was Gloria. This girl, the girl who lived in the same place as her and had been in the same class since high school. You're here. Gloria sat down directly looking at Allie and said, People in the club asked me why you were absent again. Allie, if you don't like it, why did you join in the first place? Allie said angrily, Do you think I really like to join this so-called club? Eating lettuce? Oh, my God. What kind of weird brain circuitry does one have to think of such a weird thing? In fact, I don't even know why eating lettuce can be popular on campus. And it's a college campus. Is your life so boring that you have to eat lettuce? I don't like it either. Gloria shrugged. Allie was stunned. Weren't you the one who dragged me in? Gloria played with her curly hair. Allie knew that she had just curled her wavy hair. And as a victim, she had waited for 5 hours at the hairdresser. Because I saw some boys in this club are good, so I joined. Gloria said with interest. Besides, don't you feel that finding a boyfriend is what we should do at this stage? Allie snorted. Yes, our parents worked hard to send us here, just to let us fall in love. Gloria lay down and said, I just feel that youth without love is too boring. Besides, it's not like I'm not learning. You don't spend all your time in the classroom, library, and dormitory, okay? Allie said unhappily, I'm not you, Miss Gloria. You can attend an all-night party and still get an A in the exam. But if I don't prepare well before the exam, I can only get a B. You're too tense. Gloria patted the grass beside her and said, Learn from me. Stop and stretch. You will feel that this world is actually very good. Ailey shook her head and said, I just know that if my grades can't keep up, the scholarship for next semester may be gone. As she spoke, she hurriedly tidied up the things on the ground and stood up. I'm going to the library now. Do you want to come? Gloria waved her hand. The moment Ellie turned around, she seemed to have bumped into someone. The Tagore in her hand fell to the ground. Sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I'm fine. My name is Ryan. This is Branham. Blood was still spreading. Such a weird situation could always hijack people's reaction for a while. Allie didn't react until a while later. Gloria, who was sitting on the sofa, suddenly jumped up. She didn't even bother to put on her shoes and ran over. Allie saw Gloria holding Branham's arm at once and was scared to cry. What the hell happened? Oh, my God. It must be that weird guy. That's right. Branham took a deep breath. The body of Mrs. Maggie's husband must be in this box. God, did we meet a homicidal maniac? Let's go. I don't want to stay here. Branham, Gloria said quickly. Suddenly there was a loud bang. The door was suddenly closed. It was so loud that Ellie instinctively turned to look at the door. What happened? Not only the door, but also the sliding door in the living room and the window in the dining room were all closed at the same time. Branham suddenly walked to the door and twisted the handle of the door, making a squeaking sound. But no matter how hard he tried, there was no way to open the door. Branham forcefully hit the door several times, but still couldn't break open the door of the hut. Branham suddenly turned his head. His eyes stared at the owner of the house, the young man from the east. What the hell is going on here? Why is the door suddenly closed? Luo Chiao, who was being questioned, opened his mouth slightly. He frowned slightly and looked towards the door. Boss Luo suddenly walked to the door and put his hand on the handle, gently twisting it. Why is it like this? Branham still asked loudly. Luocchio then turned around. Why is the door locked? But can you keep your voice down? You'll wake up the little guy who finally fell asleep. He pointed at Lena, who was still sleeping on the sofa. At this time, shouldn't you wake her up? Branham snorted and then walked quickly to the sofa. Looking at the situation, Branham intended to wake up the little girl, but he suddenly stopped and stepped back step by step. Oh my God! As bold as he was, he seemed to have become the most timid coward at this moment. Looking along Branham's line of sight, Allie saw the big suitcase left by Erex. The big suitcase had fallen into the pool of blood, and then the button on it suddenly opened by itself. It slowly opened a gap, and then just like that, it suddenly stopped moving. Suddenly, something suddenly stretched out from this pitch-black crack, an arm covered with blood. It crawled out. Crawl, crawl, crawl. Len's face was pale, and his trembling lips couldn't say a complete sentence. After one arm, another arm appeared. It was a human arm, but what was inside it? It seemed that he or she couldn't completely crawl out from the suitcase and could only crawl on the ground with both hands. The suitcase moved in the pool of blood, getting closer little by little. Ah! Gloria let out a scream and ran to the French door between the living room and the terrace. She pulled it crazily but still couldn't open it. In a moment of desperation, Gloria suddenly ran to the stairs leading to the upper floor and ran up. Gloria! Branham shouted. At this moment, the suitcase suddenly rushed up. Allie was stunned and only felt that her arm was suddenly caught. When she reacted, she was dragged by Len and also ran up the stairs. Branham also ran up with him. Chapter 3:13. Branham was humorous and always exuded a masculine aura, which might come from his hormones as a football player. His family condition was also good, and he knew how to be romantic. He was a good boyfriend. First of all, how should Len describe it? Perhaps it was because there would be a dull feeling when they got along with each other. Allie. What's wrong? In the corner of the school canteen, Gloria, who sat next to Allie, patted her shoulder, which made Allie stunned. Gloria said, "What are you thinking about? We are asking you a question." Is it? Allie pretended to be calm. I was thinking about a question assigned by the professor. Sorry, I didn't hear it. What did you ask me? Branham, who sat on the opposite side of the table, showed a charming smile. We want to invite you too to the Halloween party this weekend. You know, we haven't found a female partner yet. Gloria has agreed, and you are the only one left. Me. Allie subconsciously wanted to refuse, but she didn't know why. when her eyes met with Branham's. She nodded subconsciously. When Gloria regretted her nod, Gloria said in surprise, "My God, you have to know that my Allie never attends parties. She thinks it's a waste of time." Branham smiled. "That's a great honor, right, Len?" "Oh, yes, yes." Seeing Branham and Len cleaned up the tableware and left first, Allie lowered her head and drank up the rest of the red cabbage soup. Was she looking forward to it? "That's great, Allie, you are finally enlightened." Gloria put her palms together, with a surprised smile on her face. "Should I really go?" Allie suddenly hesitated. "I have to hand in the project design on Monday." Gloria held Allie's cheeks with both hands and said seriously, "Allie, do you think an old professor's praise for you?" "Oh, you must believe me. He will not only praise you." "So, do you think this is more important, or the historical significance of your first party since you came to this school?" "But I suddenly remembered that I don't have the clothes for the party." Allie shook her head. "I think I'd better not go." "Is that a problem?" Gloria patted Ellie's shoulder, blinked her eyes, and patted her chest. "Don't worry, leave it to me. My Princess Ellie. Once in a while they should enjoy the campus life, right?" Allie thought silently. "Should I enjoy my youth once in a while?" "Really? Did so many interesting things happen during your high school days?" Looking at the words on VK's chat interface, Ellie started to feel that the time she spent in the library today was different from usual. "I also want to know more about you. Interesting things about you. Can you tell me more?" Looking at Branham's selfie profile picture on the interface, Allie couldn't help but sigh. It's good to take initiative. They seem to always be able to find a topic to talk about. Since when did it start? She and Branham seem to have more topics to talk about, probably since the last invitation. In the next few days. I'm really looking forward to the party tomorrow. Yes. I'm really looking forward to it. Allie lowered her head and looked at the opened textbook in her hand. There will be dancing in the party, right? When the music sounded, the words were no longer words, but the open pages were like a screen, showing some wonderful fantasies. "Do you like me, Branham?" Well, in fact, the party in the university seemed to be far different from the party in her imagination. Of course, it was not the kind of dance party with melodious music. The subwoofer seemed to be able to cause an earthquake. The young and crazy body was twisting, and the blurred and almost dizzying lights were dazzling. Originally, there were still a few people on the dance floor, but in an instant, Ellie was pushed somewhere by the people around her. Gloria was always so dazzling. Allie looked at her in the center of the dance floor, like a queen surrounded by people. "Gloria is really beautiful." She didn't know when Len was the only one she knew. Allie glanced at Len and found that he was holding a bottle of beer in both hands. It seemed that he had been sitting here since the beginning. "Why are you sitting here?" Suddenly, Branham came out from the crowd, and his body was gently twisting with the rhythm. Branham clapped his hands and said loudly, "Come on, don't sit there." With this, Branham directly pulled Allie and Len's hands, pulling them to the dance floor. Although it was not the kind of party where people would dance, it seemed to be very good. Allie couldn't help thinking when she was twirling. She raised her head to look at Branham, and suddenly had a feeling of enjoyment. "I'm going to relieve myself. You guys go ahead." Branham whispered to Allie, and then patted Len's shoulder. "What did he say?" Len couldn't help asking curiously. He said to relieve himself. "So sorry, I'm not suitable for this occasion. I may not be as good as Branham at dancing. It doesn't matter, I seldom come here." Allie shrugged. Indeed, after Branham left, she always felt that staying with Len was unusually awkward. Your dress is so beautiful today." "Really, thank you." Allie looked around. "I'm a little tired. I'll go outside for a while." Allie, Len was suddenly pushed and bumped by people on the dance floor and became dizzy. Under the eaves outside, Branham and Gloria were kissing. That was a way of kissing that Allie had never experienced before. Allie quickly turned her back to them, although she felt that Branham and Gloria wouldn't notice her because they were hugging and kissing. She was so eager that she really hoped that they wouldn't notice her. It turned out that Gloria also liked Branham crack. The door was opened easily. Luaccio glanced at the lawn outside the house, but didn't see anything useful. He slightly answered and then closed the door. Looking at the stairs leading upstairs, he slowly walked into the living room. The little girl Lena rubbed her eyes and woke up. "Big brother, are my mom and dad back?" "Not yet." Luaccio shook his head and sat down beside Lena. Bang, 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 bang. At this moment, the sound of something crashing came from upstairs. It was too loud. Lena immediately grabbed the blanket covering herself, looking up at the ceiling. "Big brother, is there anything up there?" "Well," Luaccio thought for a while and suddenly smiled. "There's a monster. Do you believe it?" Little Lena gave a start and subconsciously opened her mouth. "Is it Mr. Monster?" Luaccio just touched her head and suddenly asked with interest, "If it's Mr. Monster and you see him, but he wants to eat your heart, what will you do?" The little girl seriously thought for a while and suddenly held her chest. "Can I give you half?" Luaccio was more curious. "Why half?" Lena opened her round eyes and said, "Because if Lena has no heart, I'll disappear like Mr. Monster, and then my mom and dad will be very sad. But if I keep half, they won't be sad. Then, what if Mr. Monster didn't dig out your heart?" Luaccio whispered. "Then what will it be?" Luaccio also looked up at the ceiling and said indifferently, "Something that belongs to you." The little girl Lena tilted her neck, thinking carefully even though she didn't understand what the big brother was talking about. But at this time, a beam of light came in from outside. The little girl suddenly jumped down from the sofa, and she heard the sound of the car engine. "It must be my mom and dad coming back. I'll open the door." The little girl excitedly ran to the gate of the villa and twisted the door lock. But it was not her mother, Mrs. Maggie, nor her father she saw. It was Erex. "Isn't this Miss Lena, the little princess of Mrs. Maggie?" Erex showed a surprised expression and took off his hat with a smile. He bowed in front of the little girl. "I'm so honored that Miss Lena opened the door to welcome me in person." But it was obviously not her parents, so Lena was disappointed. "Where's my mother?" The little girl naturally remembered that her mother went out with this weird brother. "Mrs. Maggie?" Erex smiled. "Don't worry, Princess Lena. I think you'll be able to see your mother soon. Of course, your father too." "Really?" The little girl showed a happy expression. Luaccio walked over slowly and said indifferently, "Have you found her?" "Of course." Erex squinted and smiled softly. "Thanks to your luck, we'll find her soon." Luaccio said indifferently, "I didn't do anything." Erex blinked his eyes. He put his palm gently on the edge of his ear, making an expression as if he was listening. "Really? But I seem to have heard something interesting." With that, Erex stepped back and raised his head to take a look at them. "By the way, Mr. Luaccio, can I come in now?" Erex suddenly asked, "By the way, I just told your noble servant girl that I'll pay the fee. Is it possible that Mr. Luaccio wants to collect the fee now?" "No." Luaccio shook his head and moved aside with a smile. "Please come in, respected guest." "Thank you." Bang, bang, bang. "I want to leave here immediately." Gloria's face was pale with cold sweat. They had already hidden in the room on the top floor of the villa. Branham and Len were forcefully pushing against the door, but the door kept being knocked. "Baby, listen to me. I also want to leave here immediately. But who can drive this damn thing away? Doesn't the owner of this house want to find a way? By the way, we've come up, but they're still downstairs. Are they?" Len said in a panic, "No choice. Let's jump down from here." Branham quickly suggested, "We can't hold it any more. Baby, Allie, you jump down first." "No, it's too high. I can't do it." Gloria glanced at the distance from the ground and quickly shook her head. Bang! Branham and Len, who were blocking the door, fell to the ground at the same time, and the door had been broken open. It was still connected to the gigantic leather case. Within the crack, a pair of sinister and terrifying bloodshot eyes could be seen. Only a pair of outstretched arms could be seen grabbing onto the door frame. It appeared on the door frame like a spider. Ah! With a harsh scream, Allie and Gloria were scared and fell to the ground together. When Branham was about to get up from the ground, the thing on the door frame suddenly rushed over, together with a huge leather case, and fiercely pressed on Branham's body. Branham uttered a painful cry, but his hand successfully grasped the thing's arms, and they were in a stalemate. Seeing this, Len hurriedly grabbed the coat rack in the room and fiercely smashed it on the back of the thing, but it seemed to irritate the thing. Suddenly, from the crack of the leather case, a third arm stretched out again, an extremely thick and long arm. It grabbed Ryan's neck at once, and then choked him with all its might, lifting him up directly. Run, run, run. Next Year squeezed out a voice with difficulty. Seeing this, Allie suddenly quivered and hurriedly stood up. She reached out to pull Gloria up and rushed along the edge of the wall to the door. The two rushed out of the door. Allie took a deep breath and resolutely closed the door of the room. But where should they go next? Downstairs. Although Branham couldn't break open the door if it was the glass door from the living room to the balcony, it should be able to be broken open. Or the owner of the house had already done so and now had left. Allie, we can't just leave Branham and the others like this, Gloria said nervously at this time. She put her ear on the door, listening to the sound inside the room, and swallowed her saliva. It seems there is no sound. Do you think Branham and Len have already given that thing to? Is it possible? Ellie immediately rejected the idea, but the sudden silence in the room made her hesitate. She waited quietly for a moment, but there was still no sound. Chapter 3:14. Finally, Ryan found Ellie in the middle of the crowded party. She was holding a small bottle of beer, leaning against the railing. No one knew how long she had been there. Ryan felt that he should be able to walk over at this time, but he hesitated for a moment and could only stop his footsteps, because from the other side, Gloria was walking quickly towards Ellie. Gloria was walking briskly, and the smile on her face was very beautiful. What would they say? But in this occasion, even if he tried to listen carefully, he couldn't hear anything. Gloria held Allie's hand intimately, so they should be talking about something happy. Allie. Gloria held Allie's hand intimately, and then held Allie's hand, leaning against the railing with Allie. What's the matter? You look very happy. Allie pretended to be ignorant and asked, I'm with Branham just now. Gloria didn't stop smiling, blinking her eyes. It's really too sexy, Branham. Oh my God, my heart is still beating. Is that so? Congratulations. Ellie nodded. Gloria held Allie's hand with both hands, whispering, You will bless us. We're good friends. For a moment, Allie wanted to withdraw her hand from Gloria's. How many times had she done that? Like this, grabbing his hand and saying, We're good friends. When she was a child, when she shared the cookies made by her mother. She didn't taste much of it, but gave away most of it. Let's go shopping together. Oh, okay. There was still a lot of homework to be done. Oh, I used up this month's pocket money again, Allie. Then, I have a little. You can return it to me next month. She also wanted to buy something, but she had to wait until next month. Well, this dress is nice. I like it. Well, it suits you. Do you like it? Let me give it to you. Well, it's nice. I don't like this one, but I like your one. Well, I bless you. I also like it. Finally, Gloria saw Allie suddenly stop. She quickly grabbed Allie's arm. How is it? Have you thought of a way? She had always thought that Ellie was a very opinionated girl who knew what she wanted and was very courageous. After so many years, she was really glad to have a good friend like Ellie. Gloria saw Ellie nodding and suddenly looked at her seriously, asking, Gloria, do you really want Branham? Gloria nodded. Then, we have to confirm the situation inside first. Let's take a look. Just a glance. If there is any danger, we can only run. Do you understand? Gloria hesitated for a moment. What was going on behind the door? Although there was no sound, would it be possible that Branham and Len had been killed? However, she still desperately wanted to know if she just wanted to take a look. There was a light knock on the door of the room. Gloria and Allie leaned against the door at the same time, nervously looking at the situation in the room. All of a sudden, Gloria covered her mouth with her hand. She felt as if all the strength in her body had been sucked out. In the room, that huge suitcase was swallowing Len's arm little by little. Branham just lay beside it without any movement. Even if the arm was swallowed into the suitcase, Len still didn't move. One hand was not enough, so Gloria had to use her palm to cover her mouth. However, she felt as if she had just run a 400-meter sprint. Her breathing was so urgent that it seemed that if she did not close her mouth, it would not be enough to replenish the missing oxygen in her body. Gloria shivered all over, leaning against the wall beside the door. She felt that her legs were filled with hundreds of kilograms of mercury and couldn't move at all. What should I do? What should I do? Allie. I don't want to die. She grabbed Ellie's arm as if she was grasping at a life-saving straw. Her face was pale and her lips were trembling. I can't walk anymore. Ellie, you won't leave me behind, right? You won't leave me behind, right? We're good friends. Branham and Len are dead. Allie lowered her head at this time. Gloria couldn't see Allie's face clearly, but this horrible thing was mentioned again. She couldn't help crying. I know, I saw it. Don't say it. It's too horrible. Why do you encounter this kind of thing? Allie said faintly. Allie. You, what happened to you? It's all your fault. Gloria looked up with her eyes wide open, but her scattered bangs covered most of her eyes. It was an extremely ferocious look. Under such a look, Allie stretched out her hands quickly and easily pinched Gloria's neck. Too hard. He really used too much strength. Gloria felt that her neck was about to be broken. Panic and pain infinitely magnified her discomfort. For a moment, she could only look at Allie with pleading eyes, as if asking why. It's so good without you. If you didn't suggest it, it's so good. I should have studied quietly. It's all your fault. Gloria was in so much pain. This kind of fatal suffocation made her survival instinct explode a few times in an instant. She kicked Ellie in the stomach and loosened her grip on Ellie's neck. However, Ellie seemed to have gone mad as she pounced on her again. The two were entangled together, pinching each other's neck, but their bodies unconsciously knocked open the door of the room. Both of them fell on the floor at the same time. Gloria breathed crazily, and her eyes moved subconsciously. That huge box, the monstrous thing that had stretched out a few arms that now looked like a spider, was slowly crawling toward the two of them. Allie. Gloria crazily patted Allie's body, hoping that she could notice the approaching danger. But it seemed that there was no way to wake up Allie's madness at this moment. Gloria had no choice but to kick him away again with all her might. The moment the two bodies separated, Gloria desperately got up and rushed out of the door again. She was so scared that she had no choice but to close the door again. Gloria desperately pulled the door lock, only to hear the continuous roaring and screaming in the room. It was Allie's voice. She kept shouting, "Gloria! Gloria! Gloria!" Yes. She kept shouting her name sharply and crazily. Gloria covered her mouth with her hands. Tears from the shock had already covered her cheeks with irregular tear stains. It was not until the sound in the room stopped that Gloria suddenly shuddered. This time, she didn't dare to open the door again, but wanted to escape from this place like rolling and crawling. Finally, she got up and supported herself against the wall. When she reached the stairs, she slowly helped herself down. In the living room, the light was soft. The owner of the small villa, the maid who worked here, the strange traveler Erex, and the little girl Lena were sitting on the tea table in the living room. They looked at her looked at her walking down slowly. "Get out of here." Gloria rushed down the stairs. Her footsteps were so chaotic that she almost missed the stairs. But she finally succeeded in coming down, running towards the crowd. "Run away! Hurry up! Monster! There's a monster!" Gloria pointed upstairs in horror. "Go!" Gloria hurriedly grabbed Luacio's arm, trying to pull him up from the chair. Luacio was pulled up by her, but asked curiously, "Excuse me, who are you now?" Gloria gave a start. Luacio said indifferently, "Branham? Len? Gloria? Or Allie? What did you say?" Gloria let go of Luacio's arm. "I'm Gloria." I'm Gloria? No, I'm... She slowly raised her head, wondering. "Who am I?" Looking at the scene,